Good afternoon and welcome to the AIB meeting for today's day. Today is August the 1st, 2024. First of all, let me thank the entire staff for all the work that you've been accomplishing in the last couple of weeks and the mighty efforts that you put in. You don't see you quite as often in terms of the public face, but we know that you provided a great deal of work over a number of months. And I want to thank you again because you really have put in a great deal of all of the submissions that have been forwarded and all the questions and the contacts that you've had over the last month or so. Let me also thank all of the commissioners who are online, which you checked, Madam Executive Director, to see who we have on the line from the staff, from the
Yes,
board.
yes, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chair, for on behalf of the team. It has been a lot of work this summer, and so we do appreciate the acknowledgement. So in addition to Chair Leggett, we have Member Doss, Member Lynch, Member Manco, Member Robinson, Member Stapleton, and the vice chair is not with us at the moment. He was.
I think he's having technical issues.
He will be back. So we have all present except the vice chair at the moment.
Okay, let me again thank all of you for your presence, and hopefully the vice chair will be on momentarily. I think at this point in time, we need to approve the summary of the meetings that we've had the last month. And so I hope that everyone has had an opportunity to see them and review them. And if so, we can entertain a motion now for approval.
I motion.
Okay, it's been moved. There's a second to the motion.
Second.
We moved and properly second that we approve the summary of the meetings for the last meeting. Any questions or discussion as relates to those summaries?
Is this, can I just clarify, this is a motion to adopt the two summaries from the two board?
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Thank you.
I assume we could do them both rather than individually, right? Okay.
Yeah, that's fine as long as we're clear that that's the motion. Yep. Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion on the motion before us to approve? If not, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Okay, thank you. Oh, there's our vice chair.
Yeah, somehow I couldn't get into the meeting. I had to turn my computer off and restart it, and I apologize.
No problem. Glad you.
Have we done the resolution on?
No, we have not done that.
Okay, all right.
that-
I'm sorry that for this slip up, but I made it after all.
Thank you. I think we're going to now go to the public comments, and if there are any, I think we have one person who's available for comments, and if so, Madam Executive Director, we can now bring that person aboard.
Yes. If we can bring her into there we go. And we do have Dr. Paula Turner Coleman, who would like to provide public comment. Doctor.
Are you able to? Yes. Are you able to hear me?
We can hear you. We cannot see you, but that's all right. We can hear you.
Okay. Okay. I'm in my car. I had to go on my lunch break.
There we go. We can see you now too. You're not driving, I hope.
No, I'm
Okay.
parked.
Okay.
I'm parked. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm Dr. Paula Turner Coleman. I'm coming to you today in my community advocate role. I hold interest in Wicomico County, Worcester County, and Dorchester County. The request/question I'm bringing before you today is a necessity as you oversee LEA implementation of Pillar 2, which is the recruitment and retention of diverse teachers and leaders. You will not be able to attract and retain this population to help support our students for all the reasons that the blueprint, the law, identifies. If members of this very same group are systemically being mistreated themselves. There is a reason the Eastern Shore 9 counties and the Western Shore of Maryland struggle in this area. I don't have time to get into that today. What survey and public dashboard can the AIB put in place for this population of employees to submit an annual survey to the AIB to monitor the treatment, including any maltreatment of this group, and to have this data published on the AIB and possibly even MSDE's public-facing website in the form of a dashboard? We all know what gets monitored gets done. This specific ask of you as the AIB cannot be deferred to, left in, or put in the hands of the LEA, because the board structures in Maryland actually perpetuate what the blueprint is trying to prevent. As you and have oversight, I know that your role is due to sunset in on June 30th, 2032. So I also ask that this public-facing dashboard be placed on MSDE's website either concurrently or after your role comes to a close in 2032. And then finally, as you later discuss this question, because I know you can't respond to me, I want to state that in the event, and this is quoted, taken directly from the law, in the event that a policy or decision of the AIB conflicts with another state agency or a local agency, the AIB's policy or decision holds. What I'm saying to you is this group needs your help, and you have the power to support and put additional supports in place already to help LEAs recruit and retain the population you are specifically targeting with the blueprint. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Are there any further comments, Madam Executive Director, for public comments today?
No, that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Before we go to the Executive Director's report, we have a special presentation at this point in time. I'm going to ask the Executive Director to read it, but let me, first of all, hope that she's online that can hear us. So let me thank you, Ms. Bose, for tremendous leadership, your work, the AIB, the current commission, and all that you've done to help get us to this point. I've seen you at so many different meetings and forums and workshops that, I'm not sure how you have enough time in the day to do all the things that you're doing. But your work, certainly from our standpoint, has not gone unrecognized, and we wanted to express that. Before I have the resolution read, I'm going to ask whether the Vice Chair has a few words, because he mentioned a moment ago that he would like to be here for this as well. So, Dr. Curry?
You're on mute.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say the enormous debt we all owe to Cheryl Boost. When the commission was doing its work, she provided testimony on multiple occasions, and her guidance and ideas truly helped shape the commission's report, which led to the blueprint. And after all of that contribution, when the commission report was in and the legislation got drafted, she was everywhere, promoting, supporting, ensuring that the legislation got passed. We testified together before many groups on many different occasions, and I learned rather quickly I needed to go before her because she was so awesome in her comments and so persuasive that that's the message we wanted to leave with the audience. But I just want to express my heartfelt thanks for all your leadership and getting us to and the work you did to get us to where we are with the blueprint today.
Thank you. Mr. Robinson, you have anything you wanted to say as well?
Well, thank you. I was just about to raise my hand. Everybody, I just want to make sure that I honor outgoing President Bose. I was trying to think of what to say, and I realized that this is my 15th year of teaching, starting my 15th year. And so for most of my career, and certainly for all of my active involvement in MSCA and PGCEA has definitely been under President Bose's and former Vice President Bose's tenure. I've seen how important it is for her to uplift educator voice, and how she's advocated for that over the years, and I'm eternally appreciative of that. I don't think that I would have even considered applying to be on the AIB had it not been for opportunities and leadership that have been provided to me through MSCA, through her leadership. So I do honor you, President Bose, and I wish you a happy retirement. I hope that you finally get some rest.
Well, at this time, we're going to have the executive director to read, so I want you to hear what we have in the resolution.
Thank you. We've got it up on the screen as well. So I'll just read the resolution of the Accountability and Implementation Board. Whereas Ms. Cheryl Bost was president of the Maryland State Education Association from August 1st, 2018 through July 31st, 2024. And whereas MSCA, under the leadership of President Bost, engaged deeply in the work of the Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education to develop the policies and recommendations that form the foundation of the blueprint for Maryland's future, and to support implementation of the blueprint since it was enacted in 2021. And whereas Ms. Cheryl Bost has shared her decades of experience as a 4th and 5th grade teacher in Baltimore County and in various roles in the state and local teachers unions, including 8 years as president of the Teachers Association in Baltimore County, to inform the innovative strategies and systems change that the blueprint calls for to improve educational outcomes for all Maryland students. And whereas during her tenure as president of MSCA, Ms. Bost has provided strong leadership and a commitment to collaboration and problem solving to support the once-in-a-generation transformation of the education system embodied in the blueprint for Maryland's future. Therefore, be it resolved on this first day of August 2024 that the AIB thanks Ms. Cheryl Bost for her tremendous efforts as an educator and in support of Maryland educators in public education to support the successful implementation of the blueprint and achieving its goals for every Maryland child, student, and educator, and to secure a more productive and prosperous future for our great state of Maryland. And then on behalf of the board, it is signed by the chair and the vice chair.
Thank you. Before we go for maybe a reaction from Ms. Bost, I'm not sure if anyone else wanted to say anything. If so, you have an opportunity to do so now.
I think Member Lynch has her hand up.
Yes, apologize.
Yes, I have known Cheryl for many years. She proudly hails from Baltimore County, and I think that was where I first met her and had the opportunity to learn from her and work alongside her. And ever since, she's been an incredible advocate for children and families and teachers across the state of Maryland. She's been a personal advocate, mentor, and friend to me. And so I just want to thank her for all of her guidance. Like Member Robinson, I don't think I'd be sitting on this board today if it had not been for her leadership and guidance. And I really have appreciated her as a thought partner and a leader in this space. And I am looking forward to continued opportunities to work with her wherever the world will take her post this experience.
Thank you. If there's no one else, we'll turn it over to Ms. Bost for any comments you'd like to make at this point in time.
Thank you, Chair Leggett and Vice Chair Kerwin. This is a great honor. So I thank all the members of the AIB and your Executive Director, Ms. Heiss. It has truly been a pleasure to uplift the greatest historic investment in public schools in the state of Maryland. And it is through the collaboration of the team at MSCA, our locals, and all of you and legislators that we've been able to get this funded and begin the implementation for our students, which is a great success for all of us and will reap the benefits for many years to come. I am so excited to have educator voices, as Justin talked about, and Jennifer, in so many places where we are discussing education, because it really is those folks in the classrooms and working one-on-one that are going to make the success of this blueprint really happen with our students. And so their voices are critical. I am it's awesome to see the collaboration between you all in the state board. And I know MSEA will still be a collaborative partner under the new leadership of Paul Lemley and Nikki Woodward and our executive director, Sean Johnson. I thank you, and I just encourage you to continue to listen and get out there and collaborate. Our goal is to make it successful. And sometimes we have to have those courageous conversations about what is successful, what would success look like. And to Dr. Kerwin, it was a pleasure to travel across the state with you to educate everyone and be the cheerleaders for the blueprint to really see it come to fruition. So again, I thank you all for this recognition, and thank you all for what you're doing for our students and educators. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Boy, you have excellent technology here. You're coming across sitting in the car better than we are in our office at home. It's a really beautiful picture. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now we'll go to our Executive Director's report. I'll turn it over to Executive Director, Ms. Heiss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have a lot on the agenda today, so I'm going to try to keep this brief as it's informational. We do have a new document that we're going to start sharing monthly, which is an update on report submissions, so that we can make sure that we're highlighting for everyone what we've received in the past month between meetings that has been submitted, and if we have feedback on those items, what that feedback is. So this is the first iteration of this report, and you can see that we have received reports from the State Department of Education on the expert review team deployment plan for the upcoming school year, and that is another agenda item later in the meeting. We also received a deployment plan from the CTE committee, and we are in the process of reviewing that, and we'll provide a recommendation on that at next month's meeting. And then we did also receive the latest annual report from the Maryland Longitudinal Data System on the quality and diversity of teachers. So not in response to the public comment, but just as a note that report was submitted and does contain a significant amount of data that MLDS has compiled on the qualifications and diversity of teachers. We also do have reports that we received in the spring from LEAs on the diversity of their teachers. And so we will work on following up on some of the suggestions that were made by Dr. Turner Coleman. That sort of is a good segue to the staffing update. I'm very pleased to be able to introduce a couple of our new staff who started last month in July. We have Arshia Sethi Snowden, who is our new Director of Outreach and Communications, and Jordan Berry, who is our Research Data Analyst, and sort of working in reverse. Part of what Jordan is going to be working, well, both Jordan and Arshia actually are going to be working on improving our website and adding dashboards and progress indicators to make it more transparent and provide more readily accessible information to stakeholders in the public around blueprint implementation. So I'd just like to ask Arshia and Jordan to introduce themselves.
I can go first. Hi, everyone. My name is Arshia Sethi Snowden. I am really excited to join the AIB as the Outreach and Communications Director, and really hope to work with all of you to make sure that the message of the AIB is being heard, as well as do some of the things that Rachel mentioned, improving the website, making sure that we're building partnerships with organizations and maintaining those across the state. And as a former educator, I know how important the blueprint is for transforming education in the state of Maryland. So excited to get started.
Thank you, Arshia. Jordan?
Hello, everyone. Pleasure to meet you. I'm very excited to continue work in the data and analytical space and governance. I have about 8 years of experience coming from the city of Baltimore, worked as a consultant for Bloomberg, and dealing with any type of data difficulties is my specialty. And I'm very excited because when it comes to data transparency, that ensures accountability, which is one of the backbones of the blueprint. I'm happy to work with you moving forward.
Thank you, and thank you both for coming aboard.
Great. And so also at last month's meeting, or possibly the meeting before now, we talked about a website contractor that we were in the process of procuring. And I did want to report that we do now have a website contractor on board who is going to be working with Arshia and Jordan and the rest of our team to help us improve the website, make it more easier to update, and also easier to find things. So happy to have him on board. He is not in this meeting, but we will try to bring him to the next meeting to introduce him to all of you. And that contract ended up being $190,000. So wanted to share that information with you and let you know that we are going to be providing updated budget and contract information to you as we are, when I say we, I mean our finance director, Alexandra Vernon, is finishing up the closeout process for fiscal year 2024. So we will be getting information to you prior to the next board meeting with the that information for you to review. And then moving on to the technical assistant grants update, this does also connect to the budget update a little bit. So one of the things that we've been working on is making sure that any dollars that we can use for technical assistance in fiscal 25, that we're able to encumber those funds and use those funds rather than reverting them, which will allow us to make more technical assistance grant awards in fiscal year 2025. And the tentative amount that is going to be encumbered in addition to what was already in the budget is about, and Alex, correct me if I get this wrong, please, $470,000, which brings the total available for technical assistance grants in fiscal 25 to rounding to $2.5 million. And again, we'll get you those final numbers as soon as we're finished with the closeout process. And so I did want to, there is a document just to make you and the public aware. We do have a document that provides an update on the phase 2 grant status. And I will just note that we have made the initial awards for the resource allocation technical assistance, and the document, which is also posted on the website, shows each LEA that applied to participate in the resource allocation technical assistance and the strategic partner who was selected and matched with them. We attempted to meet the preferences of the LEAs in matching them with a strategic partner, but we also tried to keep the focus in terms of the number of strategic partners to a smaller, manageable number so that the partners are working with multiple LEAs, so it's a little bit different model than what we're using for our strategic facilitators. So for the resource allocation, each partner has at least 3 LEAs that they are working with. So then there will be sort of 2 communities of practice, one sort of within the groupings that each partner is working with their group of LEAs. And we tried to match them based on what they were looking to work on and what their needs are. And then secondly, as a group, there will be a community of practice that will meet monthly with all of the strategic partners. We had the kickoff meeting for that, for a resource allocation last week. And so we're very excited to begin this work with the LEAs and with the strategic partners. We are awaiting the final project plans from the partners in order to make the final award amounts. So each LEA received an initial award of $30,000, which was sort of the minimum amount that was requested by the LEAs. And then as part of their development of their final project plan, they will they can request additional funds and justify the amount of time and the work that they want to do with their strategic partner. And then we will be making the final award amounts in August, hopefully. So that is the update on resource allocation. I'll just keep going unless there are questions. We want to pause for questions on that.
Yeah, see if there are any.
I can't see, so sorry. Okay, do we have hands? Member Robbins.
Yeah, just one question. So I understand that there's 2 rounds of priorities. Can you talk about the third priority, the other focus areas, and say more about that part?
Yes. So really quickly, for the second priority, this is essentially a continuation of the grants that were provided in this current, well, the year that just ended. There were a couple of shifts of strategic facilitators, but in general, most of the LEAs, almost all of them, wanted to continue working with their existing strategic facilitator, and they are in the process of finalizing their project plans for the work that they'll be doing with their strategic facilitators for the upcoming year. We did grant no cost extensions to the strategic facilitators for the any funds that were not fully spent in fiscal year 2024. So we are asking the facilitators to spend down their 24 grants before we award their 25 grants. So we're right in the middle of that process. And then the third priority is the other focus areas that we had identified in the grant application based on the requests of the LEAs to have additional technical assistance in the areas of pre-K expansion, career ladder development, and college and career readiness pathways and support pathways. And so we have, based on the additional availability of funds that during the closeout process, we were able to go ahead and identify the strategy lead based on the applications and the review process for each of those 3 areas. The next step is that we are going to be circling back to the LEAs that had indicated an interest in receiving additional technical assistance in these areas to see what sorts of supports they would like to have. And then we're going to move forward with awarding individual grants similar to what we've done for the first 2 priority areas for individual LEAs to work with the strategy leads. But we're also going to have communities of practice where the strategy leads for these 3 technical assistance areas will hold monthly sessions that will include the strategic facilitators from each LEA and potentially resource allocation partners, depending on the topic, because there's a lot of crossover between these issues. So we haven't gotten to the point of actually awarding grants, specific grants to LEAs to work with the strategy leads yet. So that'll be the next step.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. All right. I think that covers the technical assistance grant update.
Okay. I think we now go to the section 4, item number 4, which is the implementation plan status, where we are today.
Yes. So we have a slide deck that has information on a couple of different agenda items that we have on the agenda here. And I think, Shawanda, if you can share your screen, thank you very much. So if we can go to the next slide. There we go. And one more. So we wanted to give an update today on what, as the chair noted in his opening comments, what AIB staff and MSD staff have been spending in significant amount of time over the past several months reviewing the various submissions that the LEAs have provided for their 2024 blueprint implementation plans. The plan submissions for this year are a little more complicated than last year because there are more statutory and other requirements for what needed to be submitted in addition to the actual blueprint implementation plan. So we wanted to sort of walk our way through this and then provide a status for each of these submissions. So I'm going to start off and then we're going to sort of pass it back and forth among us. So the first item is the responses to part 1 and part 2 of the blueprint implementation guide. So these are the submissions from March and then May, and Emma is going to talk more about the status of the review of those part 1 and part 2 plans by AIB and MSDE staff. The second component is the LEAs were required to submit by July 1st their initial career ladder for levels 1 through 3 of the career ladder. The third component of the plan submissions this year is the LEAs and the county government are required to submit, again, by July 1st, an attestation, as we're calling it, that the 10% increase in teacher salary requirement in the blueprint law by June 30th, 2024, so by the end of fiscal year 2024, has been met. That's the third component. The fourth component of the plans this year and the review process is the comprehensive literacy plans that AIB and MSDE required the LEAs to submit for both pre-K through grade 5 and then also grade 6 through grade 12. We're going to talk about that when we get to that. And then the last item that is part of the plan review and approval process this year is the memorandum of understanding associated with the new career counseling program. And in many cases, LEAs and their partners will need to submit a revised MOU to the AIB for review. So those are the 5 components. Last year, we really just had 2. We had the blueprint implementation plan response, so the first bullet and the last bullet. And now this year we have these additional 3 items that are going to be part of the approval process for the AIB to grant full approval of an LEA's blueprint implementation plan this year. Can you go to the next slide, please? So I'm going to turn it over to Emma to talk more about the part 1 and part 2 submissions.
Thanks, Rachel. So I'm just going to quickly touch on the bifurcated or phased submission process, because we've talked about this in previous meetings. But just as a quick reminder, this year's plans, as we know, we have these 4 to 5 components of the overall implementation plan approval, but the actual responses to the implementation plan template, they were submitted on 2 separate dates. The first submission, part 1 submission, was due on March 15th. And this was in describing how the district is approaching system-wide blueprint implementation. And the second part, or part 2 submissions, responding to 23 questions about specific blueprint programs and components, were submitted on May 1st. AIB and MSD staff since then have been working very hard to review these submissions and have sent out requests for revisions that were shared in June with LEAs. And we have found that 8 of 24 part 1 and part 2 submissions currently meet the criteria for success after reviewing their resubmissions that were provided on July 9th and July 18th, depending on which group each of these LEAs fell into. So this also excludes consideration of question 23, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but that is still under review, and that feedback will be shared at another time with the LEAs. But currently 8 responses meet the criteria for success. That includes Anne Arundel, Baltimore County, Caroline County, Charles County, Frederick County, Garrett County, Hartford County, and Washington County. And this update has been shared with all of them. Currently, there are 7 LEAs that we have reviewed the updated responses to, and they do not meet the criteria for success and will require further revisions. And those revisions and the necessary updates that need to be made will be shared with the LEAs very soon. There are also 9 LEAs that have updated responses that are still under review, because all 24 LEAs did require updated responses to part 2 of their implementation plan submissions. I think we can go on to the next slide. So I think I already captured the fact that this followed a phased approach, but just wanted to note the way that the phased approach in the resubmission process really occurred. After reviewing the initial submissions for the part 2 responses, requests for revisions to the part 2 submission were shared with LEAs on 2 different dates and in 2 different groups. So LEAs were randomly assigned to group 1 or group 2. There was no criteria for this. It was just you were either in group 1 or group 2, and updates were or requests for revision were shared with them on June 17th and June 27th. And then they had approximately 3 weeks to update responses and submit them to the AIB and MSDE for review. Following that, AIB and MSDE staff reviewed updated responses to determine if they met the criteria for success. And as we said, each of the LEAs fell into one of 2 groups. And so if they had the request for revisions shared earlier, then their updated responses were due earlier on July 9th. And if they were shared a little later, they were asked to submit their updated responses on July 18th. So each group had equal time to submit their updated responses. Okay. So as we just noted, and after we talk about this, we can move into some of the specific feedback that we wanted to provide. But MSD and AIB staff are still reviewing responses to question 23 related to strategic budgeting and money following students to their schools. And LEAs that are participating in the Blueprint Resource Allocation Technical Assistance Grant Program have been matched with a strategic partner to assist them with budgeting strategically over multiple years. So we'll be sharing more feedback on or actually sharing feedback on the question 23 responses soon, and that will help to inform their work with the strategic partner. So I can go ahead actually and share my screen, Shawanda, and we can talk a little bit about the feedback that was shared with the LEAs. And this will look familiar to last year's process, in that we also shared feedback as part of the approval process. And the form itself also will look familiar. We just wanted to follow a very similar process to last year. So we have the summary of the review process in the same form, as well as areas for strength and areas for growth and improvement. So the forms that are linked on the attachments for today's meeting, you'll see each of these, they're individual and specific to each LEA. So I'm just showing Anna Rundle's right now, but we'll move through the 8 forms that were provided and the areas of strength and areas for growth and improvement that were provided to each LEA. But the first part, I'll just point this out in Anna Rundle's plan, summarizes the review process and what occurred as part of the review process, as well as a link to a more detailed overview of the review process if you'd like to take a look at that from the joint board meeting, and then identifies all of the links to plan materials that are available on the AIB website. This includes the initial part 1 and part 2 submissions that were shared in March and May, as well as the requests for revisions that MSD and AIB staff sent to the LEA for part 1 and part 2 of the submission, as well as updated responses based off of the requests for revisions that were shared. And in some cases, updated responses were required for both part 1 and part 2. There were about 8 LEAs that had to update responses for part 1. And when that is relevant, the updated responses for part 1 of the submission are also included. So this is just the same content for the first part of this form for each LEA, but the links, of course, are unique. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about this next part, which is AIB and MSD feedback. As we were reviewing plans, we asked reviewers to identify areas of strength that they saw in the implementation plan. These could be aligned with the criteria for success and often were, and just wanting to highlight some great work that we were and promising and innovative practices in many cases that we were seeing based off the LEA's implementation plan submission. And we also wanted to highlight areas for growth and improvement. And I really want to focus on the areas for growth part of that language, because in some cases, it's not necessarily that something is being done wrong or that there's an explicit need for improvement, but more that there's an opportunity for the LEA to consider how it is implementing particular practices or implementing the blueprint and ensure that it is continuing to look at this as a focus area moving forward. And then in other cases, of course, there's opportunities for improvement, explicit improvement that we really wanted to highlight. So with regards to Anna Rundle's plan, obviously you all have access to this feedback, and I'm going to share it on the screen here. I won't read all of it aloud, but I'll share some of the things that we wanted to, a few things that we wanted to point out. In the interest of time, I'm actually just going to share broadly across all of the LEA plans that we really saw LEAs leaning in and trying to expand access to pre-K and having really strong descriptions of practices that they were doing to expand access to pre-K. In Anna Rundle's case, they highlighted opportunities such as launching a mobile enrollment van. And, that was something that reviewers noted in reading this plan and wanted to highlight as a promising practice. So, I would encourage everyone to take a look at the explicit examples that are highlighted in the feedback, but I know that we're short on time. So I will just say broadly, we saw some exciting and innovative practices and commitment to continuing to expand access to pre-K across all plans. Specifically with Anna Rundle's plan for other areas of strength, We wanted to highlight the new strategies that they are implementing to support workforce needs, such as the Right Start Advisors program that provides ongoing coaching and professional development to their educators. They are also supporting robust Tier 1 instruction across the district to ensure that teachers can differentiate instruction to meet student needs. We were also excited to read about how they are taking steps to provide more culturally responsive programming for families, like the International Parent and Community Leadership Academy. Some areas for growth, and I'll just scroll down a little bit here as I'm continuing to share my screen. We also wanted the district to consider additional strategies that they can take to increase and expand partnerships with private providers. I will also say that this is something that we encourage all districts to continue to think about, and we know that this is an ongoing area of challenge for LEAs. So again, in the interest of time, I will just point out that this was a common thread across all LEA plans, and specifically as well for the 8 that we're discussing today. So I'm noting this now, but it's across all LEA plans. We also want the district to continue to think about the robust plan, or ensuring that there is a robust plan in place to support principals in achieving national board certification. This is also something that we saw and would encourage all districts to and want to see evidence of this robust plan being developed for all districts to ensure that the deadline for principals to have NBC, which is in fiscal year 30, July 1st, 2029, to ensure that that requirement is being met or will be met. In addition, just a couple of other areas for growth, the district should continue to ensure that pre-K programming, is aligned to K-5 instruction, and consider ways that they are increasing access to all post-CCR pathways for students through individualized student learning plans that have action plans tied to progress monitoring and stakeholder accountability. Any questions about this feedback for Anne Arundel specifically? Okay.
Yeah, I have one. When are the 3 pathways for students who are college and career ready? When are they expected to be fully developed?
In terms of ensuring that, like defining what constitutes,
right? Yeah.
That is something that we are still discussing in terms of what it means to complete, as well as the technical definition of what it means to participate in post-CCR pathway. So that is something that is still under consideration, but the opportunity to participate and access post-CCR pathways is something that should be happening across all districts right now, and has been something that needs to be in place.
And particularly with the CTE pathway, the students that are participating in that pathway, are they all in taking courses that would lead to an industry certified credential?
Whether I hesitate to answer that question. Rachel, can you share more about whether or not all students are currently taking courses that will lead them to an industry recognized credential? Is that I know that is the goal for all students to.
But that's why I'm wondering if it's been fully developed.
Yeah.
So actually, on the agenda later this afternoon is consideration of the CTE committee's industry recognized credential policy, that they have adopted and sent to us for review, which will MSDE and CTE committee have been working to identify which programs have industry recognized credentials that meet the policy that they have adopted. And so they've been in the process of identifying the CTE programs that have credentials that meet this policy. Not all programs have a credential that meets the policy yet. And so there's going to be a transition period as some CTE programs will need to identify a credential that meets the requirements and then put that in place.
They have created a standard though,
They
right?
do, yes, there is a policy,
Which we're going to look at in a little bit, I think.
right.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Member Lynch?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I'm clear, though, that we're talking about CTE specific programs, that we aren't making the statement that all post CCR pathways lead to an industry recognized credential, correct?
Oh, no, no, we're talking about CTE.
CTE,
Right,
only.
correct.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for Anna Rundle? Okay. I'll go ahead and move over to Baltimore County's areas of strength and growth and opportunity here. Again, I spoke about the strengths that we were seeing across expanding access to pre-K, so I won't touch on that, although that is a strength here as well. But specifically, we were excited to see how Baltimore County has refined and improved their process for designing and implementing individualized plans for students who are struggling to meet the CCR standard. Really specifically here, I know that Baltimore County clearly took a intentional look at the feedback that was provided as part of their 2023 implementation plan submission regarding these CCR plans that need to be developed for students who have not met that standard yet, and are working intentionally to incorporate that feedback. And that was really evident in their plan response. So just wanted to highlight that. Also, the county has updated their response to provide a robust description of key feedback by stakeholder groups. So when we asked for, as part of the requested revisions for their Part 2 responses, we asked for a summary of feedback by stakeholder group. And Baltimore County just wanted to highlight how strong that summary was, and that is evident of strong stakeholder engagement practices and incorporation of stakeholder feedback and ensuring that it's intentionally integrated into blueprint implementation. So we wanted to highlight that strength from their revision. In terms of areas for growth, with the increase in enrollment of students with special needs, we wanted to share that Baltimore County should reflect on their current early childhood programming and consider new strategies to further support the needs of students with IEPs to ensure all students are ready for kindergarten. In addition, the district would benefit from engaging in a more thorough root cause analysis that engages both stakeholders and decision makers when it comes to reducing disproportionality and identification of students for special education services, as well as suspension of students with disabilities. And the stakeholder engagement feedback that we saw, again, that updated response was really strong. The county notes that they are developing a comprehensive communications plan that will inform all stakeholders of the blueprint's goals and their alignment with BCPS's strategic focus areas. And so we are excited to see that communications plan, and we encourage the district to develop it as soon as possible. And again, really looking forward to seeing that when it is available. Any questions about Baltimore County's plan? Okay, we can move over to Caroline County. One thing we were really excited to see from Caroline County's plan was their description of their integrated tiered systems of support, ITSS, that they are implementing and how it will help to ensure that all students receive targeted interventions that they need to increase academic proficiency. We also noted that Caroline County has revamped their literacy plan to ensure that K-5 teachers have been trained in the science of reading. Caroline County, in terms of—
Emma, could I ask yeah.
So
when you find something that is particularly exciting in one LEA, that looks like it, is really innovative and could move the needle.
Mhm.
Is there a way of sharing that with those ideas with other LEAs?
Yes, I mean, I think that in terms of continued technical assistance and support, that is something that we're always looking for ways to share those ideas. They are, whether it's through working with strategic facilitators who are sharing best practices that they're learning from other districts. In addition, we know that as we continue to monitor this blueprint implementation progress, and we're able to see evidence of the impact of these innovative practices, that's also something that we really want to highlight.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
it occurs to me that somehow accumulating best practices
Yeah,
in some ways that could be shared with everybody.
yeah,
Maybe even at some point a conference where you bring representatives from LEAs and we get people who have really developed an innovative strategy to share that at a meeting with where all the LEAs are representative. I don't know if anything like that is in the offing, but I think it could have some value.
I think that Rachel Amstutz actually would really like to speak to this. So Rachel, would you mind coming off camera and sharing a little bit more?
Oh, it's so exciting. I'm really excited to hear you mention that, Dr. Curran. We don't have the official plans like hammered out and dates and times yet, but we do. Last year, we had an opportunity to connect with the LEAs and to allow them a chance to share best practices, and it spread things they were doing. Other LEAs were able to ask or come visit, and we do plan to do that again this year. So our policy team has been talking about the technical assistance needed, and we definitely plan to do that. In addition, we're meeting next week with our strategic facilitators who have been in our districts all year to celebrate the year, but to learn from them about where people are and to facilitate that share of information about best practice. So we plan to use the strategic facilitators along with our blueprint coordinators and just the whole team's review of all the plans to identify those best practices in the coming months.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Let me go ahead and move on to areas for growth, unless there's any other questions for areas of strength for Caroline County. Okay. Again, just a couple things we wanted to point out here from their submission. And these two, the two areas for growth that I'll highlight here, although I know that there's more, obviously, that we've documented in their in this plan. There are two areas for growth that we've seen across multiple LEAs. And so Caroline County is certainly not alone with this, but we want to see the county continue to strengthen its partnership with Chesapeake College to create a cohesive program of study to support students who have not reached the CCR standard. We know that they are working with the college to provide those supports. And we know that this is also something that other counties need to continue, are working to do to implement, develop and implement supports. And we want to see that continue with regards to a focus on a cohesive, fully developed program of study for those students that the blueprint calls for. In addition, the county should ensure that it has robust data collection and analysis process and progress monitoring systems in place to ensure that it is effectively monitoring progress across student groups and using the findings from those data analyses and progress monitoring systems to ensure that effective instructional practices are being put in place to help meet student needs and increase student achievement and outcomes. And again, that is something that we saw across multiple plans as an area for growth of really ensuring that data is being used effectively and with fidelity to ensure that we're really looking at targeted instructional practices to meet student needs. Yes, Member Stapleton.
Yep. Thank you. I just wanted to know what led to that recommendation. Was it something that you all saw in the data So you're kind of urging them to look at the data because you saw something, or was it a lack of discussion of the data in their response?
So in terms of what elevated this as part of Caroline County's area for growth, I would have to look back the reviewer comments honestly to get more context for where that came from. But in terms of what we saw across multiple plans, again, we just saw that this was an area of growth, or as part of the implementation plan submissions this year, there was consistent data analysis questions that would ask the LEAs to look at data that was provided through an appendix that MSD compiled and shared, and then to not just take a look at this data or represent this data, but to also analyze this data. And I think that that was a consistent area where we needed to see further analysis or further understanding of what the data was presenting. And I should have shared this earlier too, and this was remiss on my part, but these areas for growth and areas of strength, this isn't comprehensive right now. We're not sharing findings from a comprehensive look at areas of strength and areas for growth across all plans, but we will be doing that later on. We're just sharing these updates right now, but we can share more about those findings across all LEA plans once we have completed the review process and we have the opportunity to compile data and to share more about the evidence that really undergirds these conclusions.
Okay, so what I'm hearing, I think, is that basically they could improve their use of evidence and integrate the data analysis with their response. I'm just, if there is something that you all see as being an area of concern, it would be great to draw their attention to that specific thing. I just want to make sure that that's not happening. Well, look at your data harder if you guys actually know that thing that really needs to be addressed, what that is.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Thank you. Any other questions or anything for Caroline County? Okay. I think we can move forward to Charles County. Okay. So in areas of strength in Charles County plan, we wanted to highlight that they have made strides in their work to create a high quality and diverse workforce in their county, and their commitment to improving the pipeline for high quality teachers. In particular, we were excited to hear about the Southern Maryland Summit that they organized in collaboration with Calvert and St. Mary's County that was looking at alternative certification pathways for teachers, and the initiative that took to organize this opportunity for collaboration. And that is also, just really evidence of strong inter-county collaboration that we saw across multiple plans. Charles County is also demonstrating that they're making improvements to their instructional programming to ensure students graduate high school with the necessary knowledge and skills to be successful in post-secondary life. Particularly by emphasizing math instruction and ensuring student proficiency in math in grades K through 12. And they have also expanded their behavioral health supports for students within the community. And that was described in detail in their plan. In terms of areas for growth, and I should scroll down a little bit here, sorry. The county should continue to plan for providing consistent tutoring and intervention opportunities that occur during the school day, specifically for secondary students, for students in middle and high school. They should also delve deeper into their student data. Again, this is reflective of the feedback that we saw with Caroline County too, disaggregating it by student group to easily identify trends in academic achievement or lack of achievement in order to design specific interventions to meet the needs of all learners. So that's why I wanted to share that this is something we saw across multiple plans. Any questions about some of these areas for growth that we're highlighting here? But again, I know that that's not comprehensive to all the things that are in this document.
Question, okay.
Yes, what was that?
No, I was asking was there any question, if not, to go ahead, continue.
Okay, thank you. For Frederick County, we wanted to highlight a few things as well, that they have demonstrated strong efforts to build partnerships with outside entities, in particular with regards to building partnerships with institutions of higher education to maintain a pipeline of qualified future teachers and leaders. They have realized a 10% increase over the last 4 years in applications from teachers of color. And they have also demonstrated creative approaches to meet students' needs through strategies, including the development of new math interventions for students who are not on track to meet the CCR standard, as well as a comprehensive planning process for continued progress and addressing challenges across both elementary and secondary grade levels. In terms of areas for growth, we would like to see the district continue to review its plans for supporting high school students to participate in dual enrollment courses that fit their interests and career goals to ensure that they are effectively involving and leveraging the expertise of career coaches. And then, one thing that we know is evident in Frederick's plan. They have detailed considerable efforts and initiatives to engage a diverse group of stakeholders, but talked about the limited feedback that they have received from stakeholders and from the community with regards to blueprint implementation. So we recognize the efforts that they've already gone to get stakeholder feedback, and we'd like to see the district continue to think about what those strategies which of those strategies have been successful, which strategies have not been successful, and make adjustments continually to to continue to strive to get that stakeholder feedback and ensure that the community is engaged in the blueprints implementation and development. Any questions?
Yeah, the 10% increase over 4 years in applications of teachers of color. Do you have an idea what that means in terms of actual employment opportunities?
Well, that's actually something that I probably should have mentioned as still an area for growth. We wanted to recognize the increase that they have seen in terms of applications, but we know that there is still disproportionalities in terms of the population of teachers of color in the district, especially in comparison to their population of students and the diversity of their students. So this is still an area for growth for the district. I don't have the exact percentages in front of me in terms of the comparison of teacher to student population and the diversity of their teacher population to their student population. But we know that this is still an area for continued focus, but we just wanted to highlight the success because we know that this has been something they are focusing on.
Yeah, I know that there's going to be a while before you actually reflect at all the number of teachers per the population based background and foundation. It's the growth that I'm looking at. In other words, many, many years before you can actually close that gap, the disparity between population and the teachers in the system. But there's a difference between the applications and what they've done in terms of actual employment of people of color. So they need to follow that. So, and if that's an area of growth for us, and there's an area of growth for us, but I don't want us to be misled or in some way misunderstand the difference between applications and actual people being hired.
Definitely. And even though I didn't share that earlier as an area for growth verbally, that is something that is in their areas for further growth and improvement that we've documented, that this is still an area for concern and we need to track this moving forward. Yes, Member Doss.
Thank you. Can you flesh out a little bit more that last bullet point with FCPS's plan details considerable efforts and initiatives to implement and engage a diverse group of stakeholders in the implementation? Is that referring to stakeholders such as the workforce area, or can you just define that a little bit more?
We're talking about both internal and external stakeholders, so that includes members of the Frederick community, broadly outside of the workforce, as well as teachers, principals. So we're thinking internal stakeholders, folks who are actually working in schools, and our educators as well. Yes, and then in terms of the strategies that they've implemented, I know that they go into detail in their plan, and so we can take a look at it, but I know that they've really sought to keep stakeholders, again, internal and external stakeholders, apprised of what's happening with the blueprints implementation. They've created several different avenues, both on their website as well as in other opportunities, surveys to the community. I'm trying to remember because there's 24 plans, but I remember that I think they have really visible buttons on their website where people can click and provide feedback on blueprint implementation, so that it's front and center when you are going to the FCPS website. You can see this opportunity for providing feedback on the blueprint or sharing thoughts on the blueprint. I wish I had their plan up in front of me so I could talk about more of the examples, but they detail them pretty well in there. And I just know that that's been something they've still struggled with regards to, ensuring that these opportunities are getting folks engaged and getting their feedback. But we just wanted to recognize that efforts certainly have been made to get that feedback.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, any other questions?
I do not see any other questions.
Okay, we can move on. Thank you. All right, we just have 3 more plans to discuss, and so I will move through these as quickly as I can here, but want to make sure that we're giving them the time that we need as well. So for Garrett County, some of the strengths that we were excited to see here, Garrett County has partnered with Head Start to implement collaborative pre-K 3 classrooms. And we know that this demonstrates strong practices to improve, to provide students with additional resources. And again, going back to this theme of trying to expand pre-K and the efforts that districts are implementing in order to do so. Garrett County's response also provided detailed a robust approach that the district is implementing to increase teachers with national board certification. And they have also implemented a comprehensive needs assessment that we wanted to highlight and think could be a best practice to be implemented in other districts as well. That includes disaggregation of progress monitoring, provides insights related to implementation of ELA academic programs and how the district is effectively supporting students and staff. In terms of areas for—
Emma, could I ask you?
Yes.
I'm very interested in the Head Start and pre-K preschool collaboration. And so is that happening in basically all of their preschool program, with all of their preschool programs?
I'm going to defer and see if any of the other folks who are on this call who read Pillar 1 responses specifically could help to answer that question. If not, that's something that we can circle back to. So Libby and Rachel, I'm wondering if you guys happen to know off the top of your heads, and if not, we can look back and see if that's happening across all schools.
Across all schools in Garrett County.
Yes.
I read this a while ago. I remember that it is, I'm not going to remember it correctly. I believe it is their full model, but I need to double check that. But in
Okay.
each of theirs, but I can get back to you.
Well, you know, there's enormous potential here and
Yes.
a significant cost saving. Not, well, I should say cost sharing. The money will be the same, but it will be cost sharing. And uh, Rachel will know that I had a conversation at a conference with the Head Start folks who were very interested in trying to broaden this approach across the state. Has anything happened with that, Rachel?
We have talked with MSDE and we're in the planning stages to hold a convening with Head Start providers and LEAs to discuss the how to leverage Head Start programs more and help the LEAs and the Head Start providers
This is
collaborate more.
Yeah, I mean, this is truly a win-win because it's good for Head Start and it's good for us. It's a matter of just getting people together. Now, there are probably some bureaucratic rules that have to be addressed, et cetera, but there is just so I'm so glad Garrett County is doing this. I think it is a model that we can highlight and use in other LEAs.
They've definitely been a leader on this for several years. And I do believe it is in all of their pre-K programs, in all of their schools, but we'll confirm that.
I would add it's also been really great for our students and our teachers, just the collaboration, the professional development, and the way that they're streamlining services has really been phenomenal.
Yeah.
In terms of areas for growth and improvement, again, coming back to this idea that growth and improvement, it doesn't necessarily mean that something is not being done well, but this just could be a continued area for focus. We would like to see GCPS to continue to prioritize the expansion of pre-K opportunities for 3-year-olds and the unique needs of this student group as compared to 4-year-olds. And also wanted to note that Garrett County should continue to analyze and reflect on root causes leading to a workforce that is less diverse than the student body. We know that this is an area of focus. We would like for it to continue to be and to that analysis to ultimately lead to changes that could help to increase the diversity of its workforce so that it does match the diversity of its student body ultimately. Any questions? Okay. In terms of Harford County, we wanted to highlight the district's efforts to address their physical space and facilities limitations that they've undertaken to help expand pre-K opportunities. And also note that the district has taken steps to create more intentional instruction for their K-5 programming and ELA and math. They have also implemented a really robust approach to diversifying their workforce that includes a comprehensive set of strategies that address the issue from all angles, including partnerships with institutions of higher education, cohort support programs. Blah, that was a mouthful, sorry. For potential and new teachers, as well as mentorship programs that can help to expand the diversity and size of their workforce while ensuring that it is also continues to be a high quality and diverse workforce. In terms of areas for growth and improvement, the district should continue to monitor its strategies to support conditionally certified teachers to earn full certification and ensure that these strategies are effective, and also reflect on their PK programming and how it aligns to K-5 instruction to ensure alignment in foundational skills across ELA and math. Any questions? Okay. Our last plan that we're talking about today for parts 1 and 2 responses is Washington County. The a few things that we wanted to highlight here, that WCPS's plan really reflects a thoughtful approach to increasing diversity and developing a culture of inclusion through valuing and retaining their employees. We also noted that WCPS has really taken time to rethink systems and structures that were not working on behalf of students and is recreating what their school system can look like. Which is really, I think, at the heart and soul of the blueprint, rethinking education and what it looks like in Maryland. This includes creating a math plan that supports students to be more prepared for meeting the CCR standard and as well as sustainable approaches to implementing high quality tutoring intervention services. In addition, the district's multifaceted engagement framework and summary of stakeholder feedback shows that how it has intentionally engaged with a diverse array of stakeholders. This was really exciting to see. That one of the resources that they attached in their plan was a really expansive spreadsheet that categorized and looked at different stakeholders, what their perspectives were, what information and what they can bring to the table in terms of blueprint implementation and what we should really be seeking out their input on and how that's being done. So just really want to highlight that was exciting to see and something that in terms of bringing this practice again, as you were speaking to Dr. Kerwin, to other districts, we could see this being implemented elsewhere, or a similar approach being implemented elsewhere. In terms of areas for growth, we wanted to note that WCPS should continue to monitor its early childhood teacher pipeline to ensure it remains able to meet the demand for pre-K programming and that educators have opportunities to advance their career. And also that Washington County should continue to expand its partnerships with Hagerstown Community College and other institutions of higher education to ensure that students who have not met the CCR standard by the end of 10th grade have the supports they need. Again, this speaks to a cross LEA need and area for support or continued technical assistance and things like that to ensure that there's strong programs and partnerships in place with IHEs that can help to support students who have not reached the CCR standard yet. Any questions?
Okay, let's go on there.
Okay, I think we can actually go back to the slide deck. That's all for me for this part right now anyways. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing, and Shawanda, if you wanted to bring the slide deck back up.
Great,
Is this-
thank you.
Go back to the executive director at this point.
Yes,
Okay.
so we will move on to the career ladder. Oh, Mr. Manko, or I should say Dr. Manko.
Yeah, I mean, this goes without saying, but as you read through all of the reviews and the comments, like it's just an immense amount of work. I mean, it's very, very apparent the level of detail and precision that the entire team, both the MSD team and the AIB team, did in terms of going through and reading through each of these plans and going through and highlighting things that were exceptional and also identifying areas of growth and development, and just very appreciative of everybody for the level of seriousness and care in which they've taken this process, and hopefully that is reciprocated by the LEAs, and they go through and they acknowledge that, and they really work to elevate the things that are going well, and they learn from one another about the best practices that are highlighted, and then they're working to remedy some of the issues that have been elevated.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I will just say that given, we've seen great responses from the folks that we have the pleasure of working with consistently on a day-to-day basis at each LEA. Just a excitement to continue this work forward, as well as commitment to getting responses to us as soon as possible with the necessary updates and everything. But It's really been, we are seeing that level of care and that thought. I think, really looking at these areas of feedback and engaging with them. And that makes our jobs really exciting to see that and to continue this work forward. So just wanted to note that as well, but thank you.
Okay, so moving on to career ladder. As I mentioned earlier, by July 1st, the blueprint law did require LEAs to submit their career ladder as part of the guidance that MSDE and AIB developed for this submission of the initial career ladder. The things that LEAs were required to submit is their levels 1 through 3 of the career ladder, what they've negotiated and agreed upon with their teachers union for what levels 1, 2, and 3 of the career ladder will encompass, as well as the salary scale that applies to teachers as they are placed and move through levels 1 through 3, including salary increases for earning national board certification and teaching at a low performing school. And of course, the state funding formula for the career ladder has provided the minimum of $10,000 for teachers who earn national board certification, and then an additional $7,000 for teaching in a low performing school. Some districts are able to negotiate a larger salary if they so choose, paid for with local funds. The initial career ladder also needed to include a summary of any changes in duties or responsibilities for teachers on levels 1 through 3. And then if an LEA plans to implement level 4 of the career ladder in the upcoming school year, the initial plan needed to include a detailed description of level 4, the agreed upon salary increases, and the roles and responsibilities. So level 4 is optional. Levels 1 to 3 are mandatory for this initial career ladder submission. In addition, the LEAs are required to negotiate the salary increase associated with the first maintenance of certification for teachers that hold national board certification. Under the blueprint law, once someone earns national board certification, the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards requires that certification to be maintained through a process every 5 years. And once a teacher earns that maintenance of certification, as it's called, then they are entitled to a salary increase that is subject to negotiation between the LEA and the teachers union. The LEAs are required to submit that first initial maintenance certification agreed upon amount by September 1st, but we did encourage them to submit it July 1st as part of this initial submission. So those are the requirements.
I have a question.
Member Doss.
Oh.
Member Doss had her hand up first. Yep.
Okay.
No, sorry, thank you. Just overall, how is it going in general with the negotiations with some of this? Because I know that impacts the levels 1 through 3 and what some of the LEAs can submit. And then how are we reacting to this, or what is it that we can do?
So, Shawanda, if you could go to the next slide, I think that will
okay.
help to answer that question. As of September 1st, 20 of the 24 LEAs submitted their initial career ladder. There are 4 LEAs, Anne Arundel, Baltimore City, Prince George's, and Somerset, who did not submit an initial career ladder on July 1st and did provide email confirmation that they were in various states of working to reach an agreement. We have more recently received an email from Prince George's County that they have reached a tentative agreement, but they're still in the process of putting that agreement in writing and having it signed. And so we haven't received that from Prince George's yet. So 20 of the 24 were submitted something and reached some agreement. 10 of them did not include that first maintenance of certification in their July 1 submission. So we're still waiting on that first in that time. So they aren't late. They just we don't have them yet. And so we can't actually recommend approval of their initial career ladders until we have all of the components. So then I can briefly touch on this and then come back to it. But so AIB staff has taken the lead in reviewing the initial career ladders and whether they meet the statutory requirements. And 5 of those that have been submitted do meet all of the requirements, including having that first maintenance of certification. In some cases, they've have more than just the first. They've negotiated the second and the third and the fourth. And so you can see those counties are Caroline, Hartford, Kent, Washington, and Worcester. There are another 2 districts, Montgomery and St. Mary's, that have met, based on our review of their initial career ladders, all of the requirements for the initial career ladder, except we are waiting to receive the first maintenance of certification. And then that leaves 13 that LEAs that we have reviewed their initial submission, and there we have some questions and need some clarification before recommending that they have met the statutory requirements. So we're in the process of putting that feedback together for those 13 LEAs with the request for additional information. Did that answer your question? I know that was a lot of information too.
I did, I know.
Okay.
You had it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Vice Chair Kerwin?
Yes, thank you. So with the initial board certification, a teacher gets $10,000, and that stays in their salary as long as for the full 5 years.
Yes.
They have to, if they want to continue to be board certified, they have to go through the process again. And what you're saying, I just didn't remember this. Any increase beyond that initial 10,000, that 10,000 will stay. If they get board certified, recertified, what happened to the original 10,000 bump? Does it stay in their salary automatically, or?
Yes.
Okay. And so what the recertification, the reboard certification, what would be negotiated is any increase beyond that 10,000. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And what the law states is that the state will participate in up to $8,000 increase for the first maintenance of certification.
The state does
the state
8,000.
will participate in, then the state pays its share and the local county pays its share. So it's not that the state pays 8,000, but the state pays its share of an 8,000. If they negotiate more than 8,000, then it would be come just solely from local funds.
Mhm.
And then they could also negotiate less than 8,000, and then that amount would be subject to a state share and a local share.
I see. And that's for the recertification.
Yes.
Right. Gotcha. one thing I'm also interested in is during the commission, the final determination on whether someone moves up a rung in the career ladder was with the principal and perhaps the superintendent as well, but it involved the principal's decision based on the feedback from an established process, including master teachers, et cetera, reviewing the candidate. Is that an element of all these plans?
So that is part of the level 4.
That's level 4.
Part of the level 4 is to and there is, as you point out, there are statutory requirements that govern that process, but then beyond what's required in the law, it's subject to negotiation in terms of how teachers will be selected to move from level 3 to level 4 and the various tiers within level 4 of the career ladder. So that for districts that want to implement level 4 in this coming school year, and there are a few that are planning to pilot it, they are required to include that in their plan. But for most of the LEAs, based on our review, they only include levels 1 to 3, and they'll be submitting level 4 next year.
But the decision resting with the principal is in the blueprint?
I need to I haven't looked at that language in a little bit, but it does include the principal, I think possibly making a recommendation to the superintendent.
Yeah, that's something like that.
And
okay.
And then there was, and then what I also recall that the ultimate goal was that it be a peer evaluation and recommendation. But until there are sufficient number of teachers on level 4 of the career ladder, it is difficult to have those teachers determine whether other teachers should move up.
Okay.
So there's a transition period until there's a sufficient number of teachers on level 4.
Great, thank you.
Sure. Are there any other questions for the moment? Okay, so what I was very briefly, I thought I would just show you, and these are available for you, for the board members and for the public, the feedback that we have provided for the 7 districts that we have, staff has determined meet the requirements of the statute at this time. So if I can just share my screen. Not sure I actually have access. Do I have access? Oh, there we go. Sure. So just so in no particular order, Harford County is one of the career ladders that we've reviewed and found meets all of the statutory requirements. And so the feedback form is similar to what Emma shared for the blueprint implementation plans. So we have just noted what the areas of strength are. And you can see that Harford County's career ladder includes levels 1 to 3 and includes the requirements about how teachers are placed and move through levels 1 to 3 with the associated pay scale and pay enhancements as they move from 1 to 3. And they also have included the maintenance of certification, additional salary increases. And I believe that they included those for, I think, more than the first maintenance, and 2 or 3 of them they've agreed upon. And then you can see in areas for growth and improvement, we do note that if there are changes in duties or responsibilities for teachers on levels 1 to 3, that we want to make sure that that is included in their next submission, as they are also thinking about how teachers are going to move from level 3 to level 4, and how they're going to demonstrate that they've on level 3, that they've had responsibilities or duties that have enabled them to now meet the requirements to move to level 4. So this is feedback that we are providing for many of the LEAs. We're not asking them to revise their career ladders that they've submitted, but that they think about this and incorporate it in their next submission. And then the other request is to share their signed MOU when it is finalized, just so that we have the documentation to verify that that the career ladder took effect July 1, 2024, as required by the law. Many of the LEAs did submit a signed MOU. I would say maybe half of them, but the other half did not. So this is, again, feedback that is probably going to be fairly common in what we're asking the LEAs to provide. And then the other, are you able to see Washington County now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is just another example of a county that we're providing feedback for today. And this is another example of a county that has met all the requirements of the statute. And so I won't read it to you, but you'll see it's very similar feedback, both in the areas of strength and then the areas for growth and improvement. So those are a couple of examples. There are 7 in total that we're prepared to provide feedback, public feedback today. And as I said, the 13 other LEAs will be receiving some requests for additional information and potential revisions to their career ladder. And then we are waiting on the other 4 LEAs to submit their career ladders so that they can be reviewed. Are there any questions about career ladder before we move on? More questions, I should say. Okay.
Okay, I think I wanted to come
Sorry.
back to the explanation and maybe fuller detail regarding the distinction between the requirement for the career ladder, which is in law, and the authority on the collective bargaining agreement, because those seem to be in conflict. And I think we need to put a little bit more time to fully explain that so that everyone is clear about that, because I think that will be, at least now, unless we have some legislative correction to this, an ongoing challenge for us. So you could take a time and just explain that, the legal challenge for us, or maybe the attorney wants to do so as well.
I can I can start, and then happy to have Heidi, Ms. Dutter, fill in. So, you know, essentially the blueprint law requires the LEAs to submit their career ladder by July 1, 2024. The career ladder is required to meet there are very specific items in statute that need to be in their career ladder. Anything that is not specified in the law is subject to negotiation as part of the career ladder. So the career ladder, it has overlap between the blueprint law and existing collective bargaining law. And so it's that overlap that is potentially creating a challenge. And so for the counties that have not submitted their career ladders yet, they have not concluded the collective bargaining process in order to be able to submit a career ladder that has been agreed upon. So they haven't met the deadline that is in statute, but they didn't meet the deadline because of a process that is also in statute. And so where we are at this point in terms of of addressing that is sort of giving the LEAs the time right now to continue to hopefully be negotiating and in discussions in order to reach agreement. But they also have other options under the collective bargaining law if they are not able to reach agreement. And at a certain point this fall, as we look to implement our own policy regarding the release of the blueprint funds, because ultimately this whole approval process that we're going through, aside from obviously providing understanding what LEAs are doing as they implement the blueprint and providing feedback and guidance and assistance with that, is the release of the blueprint funds. And that is a main responsibility of the AIB each year to determine whether 25% of the new blueprint funds that each LEA receives, which are automatically withheld until the AIB approves release of those funds each year, whether to release those funds. And under the policy that the AIB adopted last year, essentially, LEAs have until October to submit their sort of best and final version of whatever has not been submitted yet for review and approval. And if we get to that point and there are LEAs that have not submitted their career ladders, then this is when the overlap between the blueprint law and the collective bargaining law are going to kind of come to a head, and some kind of decision is going to have to be made in order to trigger the appeals process that the AIB adopted in order to have a process for determining whether the funds are released or not.
All right.
Ms. Gooder, did you want to add
Yeah.
anything?
Little trouble coming off of mute. No, I think you handled it pretty well. The statute says what the statute says, and of course there is the overlap with collective bargaining. I guess one could ask the question why some of these things hadn't been negotiated prior to now. But aside from that, there are some provisions in statute that I guess would make it hard if you just started negotiating these things in this year to conclude by July 1st, 2024.
But part of it is that when the existing or old collective bargaining agreement expires, so that it may not be feasible ordinarily to start at the time that is consistent with our calendar, because that may not coincide with the existing time frame within the existing collective bargaining agreement, wouldn't it? In other words, if I've got a 3-year agreement, I wouldn't start on that until maybe year 2 or 3. And I have no career ladder in that. And then I get to the last year when I'm in that process, it may then create a conflict. So you're right that they should start at a time that provides enough opportunity to resolve it, but some may not be in that position to do so because of the time frame within the existing collective bargaining agreement.
The only thing I would add is that I believe that collective bargaining agreements have reopening provisions that allow for within, even if you're in a multi-year agreement, there are certain reasons why the agreement can be reopened, and meeting a statutory requirement hopefully is one of those reasons.
But would that open the entire agreement up, or just narrowly tailor it to deal with a particular matter?
I mean, that would certainly probably be on a case-by-case basis. I just think that the law has existed for some period of time, and probably there have been earlier opportunities to negotiate, but we are where we are now, and we're dealing with the law as it exists.
What you understand, but what I'm getting to is this: is that was not a consideration once the clear ladder authorization was provided in law. That is, that overlap or the conflict with collective bargaining. And at some point, we may have to get some clarity on that, i.e., potentially to go back and say, okay, how do we resolve this legislatively so that we can get these matters resolved in a timely fashion? This is not conflict with another existing law that sort of ties the hands of both the board and the local administrators. Because there's a conflict, but I don't think that was anticipated once we provided for the AIB and the law that provided the underpinning for career ladders. I'm not sure that was even thought about at that point.
Well, maybe we can have a broader discussion.
But we don't have to answer it now. I'm simply saying,
Yeah.
if we end up, because we're in a dilemma here, potentially, and we need to get this resolved, and we should not have to deal with this on a continuing basis. There should be a fix to this so that we can resolve this in a timely fashion.
Well, I think for the current year, Rachel, Ms. Heiss has articulated a process that the AIB has to, bring some closure and enforce the career ladders being implemented in this year. Moving forward, there might be some things we need to look at in future years, but I think that your process for appeals and for withholding or not releasing funds is your ability to ensure that the LEAs get as close to implementation or as close to complying with the statute as possible.
Okay, and thank you.
If there is, obviously there will be more on career ladder, but for the moment, if we don't have any other questions, we can go back to the slide deck. And thank you, Shalonda. And then we can move on to the, I think it's the 10% teacher salary attestation. Okay, so another requirement of the blueprint law was by July 1st that the LEAs needed to notify the AIB that they had met the requirement that teachers received a 10% increase, salary increase, over a 5-year period, ending at the end of June 24. So a cumulative 10% increase in salary over 5 years, from fiscal 20 to 24, with fiscal 19 being the baseline year to compare whether the 10% had been met. In order for them to demonstrate that to us, the AIB provided the LEAs and the county provided to the LEAs what is called an attestation form that both the superintendent and someone with the legal authority to sign for the county government to confirm that they did meet that 10% salary increase requirement. All of those attestation forms were submitted, signed, have been submitted to the AIB, and we did some follow-up for a couple based on the making sure that the language that they submitted met the attestation requirement, and all 24 do meet that 10% requirement in that they have attested that they have met the requirement. All of that documentation is available on our website now. And so for all 24, that component of the approval process is complete. Any questions on that item? Okay, then moving on to literacy plans. So as part of the Blueprint Comprehensive Plan update last year, and in collaboration and partnership with MSDE, LEAs were required to submit comprehensive literacy plans this year. They actually submitted a draft pre-K to 5 plan in January, and this was part of the effort that AIB and MSDE have been undertaking as part of the expert review team process during the previous school year, and the partnership with the Maryland Initiative for Literacy and Equity, or MILE, at the University of Maryland, College Park, and Morgan State University. And so MILE reviewed the draft pre-K through 5 literacy plans that were submitted in January and provided feedback to MSDE and the LEAs, and suggested revisions. The LEAs then were required to submit their revised plans, pre-K 5 plans, by I think June 28th. And they were also required to submit their grade 6 through 12 plans by June 28th. MSDE has taken the lead, working with MILE to review the literacy plans, and they have advised that MILE will complete their review of both the revised pre-K 5 plans and the grade 6 through 12 plans towards the early part of August, so that and MSD has also conducted an initial review of the plans, the grade 6 through 12 plans, and that they will be providing formal recommendations to the AIB on approval of the literacy plans before our next meeting. So we have all of the plans from all 24 LEAs, and they are in various stages of review. And we will be receiving recommendations from MSDE and MILE in August. Member Lynch.
Yes, so in light of the fact that MSDE is in the process of putting out a literacy plan, getting feedback, drafting that, they don't expect to have their final submission ready for their board until September. I'm wondering how all of these pieces interact together. So I'm wondering how, we have districts that have put together a literacy plan ahead of a literacy policy. And I'm wondering how feedback from MILE is both integrating into this literacy plan and into the literacy policy, so that we don't end up with districts having sort of 3 disparate points of information that they are then trying to integrate into their own literacy programs in their districts.
Thank you for that question. So I think that we would definitely want to ask Superintendent Wright and the state board to, specifically to provide a response to your question, because I do not want to speak for them. But what I will say is that I know that MSDE and MILE have been working closely together in developing the rubric that was used, and AIB staff did review it as well. The rubric that was used is being used to review the literacy plans, and also the same rubric was used as part of the expert review team visits this year. The Mile team went into I'm going to say approximately 70 elementary schools and observed literacy, teaching, coaching, and professional development. And the same rubric was used for both of those items. But we would want to confirm that all of that information is aligned with what is in the literacy policy that MSTE has put forward. It's my understanding that I think there were about 600 pieces of feedback on that initial literacy plan, and MSTE is in the process of revising the draft literacy plan, and then there's going to be a public hearing later this month before the state board potentially votes on the policy in September. So we can follow up with MSDE and with Dr. Wright to make sure that we can get the answer to your question.
Thanks, I appreciate it. And I guess my sort of follow-up is that if there's any feedback that has to go to the districts, that timeline be taken into consideration of, for me, I just want to make sure everything's in alignment. Our expert review, the literacy plans, the MSD literacy policy. I'd love to see them all in clear alignment with each other. And I'd like to have the districts have that ability to kind of have that breathing room should some of these pieces not be fully formed yet.
Thank you. Any other questions about literacy plans?
I don't see any questions or comments.
If we could go to the next slide, then this is the last component of the LEA blueprint plan approval process this year. And this relates to those career counseling MOUs that are between the local workforce development board, the LEA, and the community college to jointly implement the new career counseling program for middle and high school students. Many LEAs, or not just the LEAs, many MOUs will need to be revised this year to, in some cases, only 1-year MOUs were adopted last year, so they don't have an MOU for this coming year. And there's also, as AIB, MSC, and CTE committee staff have been working pretty intensely in some cases with the partners in each county. Some of the provisions in the MOUs that require more detail so that it's very clear what all of the 3 partners are agreeing to, what the division of responsibilities is, what the flow of funding is, and also how funds that were not spent in this first year. So the 23-24 school year was the first year for these new career counseling programs. And in a number of counties, just the timing of standing up the program and completing the recruitment and hiring process has meant that there were funds that were not able to be expended in the first year. And so how those dollars will be spent in the coming years. MSDE and AIB have provided fiscal guidance through MSDE's LEA blueprint financial, we call it the baby blue book, so the actual title of it is escaping me. But what we've provided guidance that depending on who is has primary responsibility for the funds, either the local workforce development board or the LEA may retain unexpended funds from the career counseling program in fiscal 24. Those monies have to be held restricted only to support career counseling, and they have to be expended in the next 2 years. So they have to spend them in fiscal 25 and no later than fiscal 26. So we are advising the partners to include in their MOU what the process will be for determining how to spend those dollars and what they may be used for. And so at this point, we've received one revised MOU, and we've been reaching out to determine which counties we should expect a revised MOU from. We're not quite done with that process, but it's looking like about half of them at least will need to submit revised MOUs. And that will be part of the approval process for the release of funds, as it was last year, for the initial MOUs, that they had to have their signed MOUs, and those MOUs had to contain certain provisions in order for their funds to be released. Any questions on career counseling? Member Lynch.
I know we've had conversations about this before. I'm just wondering if you can provide a little clarity, because I know part of what we've been discussing is the flow of funding. And so, part of what happens when we talk about the flow of funding is we also talk about audit processes. So can you just talk a little bit about, sort of how the funding has the option to flow, and then what are the audit responsibilities, and who is ultimately responsible for audit findings?
So the statute, the way that the funding is provided to the LEAs is they receive a certain amount per pupil in the foundation program that is associated with providing the career counseling required by law. LEAs receive those dollars on a bi-monthly basis throughout the fiscal year. MSD and AIB provided guidance that the most straightforward and sort of clear flow of funds would be that the flow of funds to the LEAs should then flow to the local workforce development boards, because in the statute they are to be the lead in implementing these new career counseling programs. However, AIB and MSD also advised that if there were based on the MOU agreement, whatever the partners had determined that the LEA would be responsible for in terms of programmatic responsibility and also spending, that those dollars could be retained by the LEA before the rest of the money was passed through to the local workforce development board. A number of counties did implement that process, but many did not, in part because of a concern around accountability for the funds. And so in many counties, it has been a reimbursable, it's been an invoicing process with a reimbursement. That has been challenging for many of the workforce boards because they don't have the cash flow to kind of forward fund the program. And so we've been working with those counties to revise their fiscal arrangement, and in some cases they provided a certain amount upfront and then made it reimbursable after that point. So we are continuing to work with the counties to try to really ensure that the programs can function and operate, and that the flow of funds should not be getting in the way of hiring career coaches or being able to implement the programs in the schools. And in some cases that has been an issue. So we're continuing to work with them on that. In terms of auditing, you know, in government, any entity that receives funds is subject to audit, and taxpayer funds or public funds is subject to audit. And each entity will be responsible for the audit requirements and documentation of their program, and what they, you know, what flows through their program, they're going to have have documentation for. And so certainly MSD and AIB appreciate the need to have documentation and have accountability for that dollars are being spent on things that are eligible. And so certainly accountability is important, documentation is important. But the dollars also need to be getting to where they need to be. Did that answer your question?
It did, thank you.
Okay. If we don't have any other questions, I think that we've completed this agenda item, which I
Okay.
think is item 4. Sorry. And we can move on to, sorry, I gotta find my agenda here. Item 5,
Okay.
which is the updates to the Blueprint Comprehensive Plan. So as
We would have to take a vote on this at this time, or it would be later.
there's no vote on the Blueprint Implementation Plan, so there's no vote on item 4. There is a motion, there is a vote on item 5.
Okay.
For the one that we're about to take now. So
Can I
Yep.
just ask procedurally, are we planning to take a break?
How much time do you think we're gonna take for the next, thanks for reminding me. How much time do you think we take for the next item?
Depending on questions, I would say 15 minutes.
Okay, why don't we take a small break and come back at 3:20? Would that be okay?
Sure.
All right, come back at 3:20. Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like we have all of our board members, so we have a quorum to
Okay.
continue our public meeting.
All right, let's go back to the agenda then.
Thank you. Okay. So the Blueprint Comprehensive Plan, as a reminder, and actually, could you go to the next slide? It's possible it'll be on the slide. It's not. Okay. As a reminder, the Blueprint Comprehensive Plan is required to be updated by the AIB each year by August 1st. And we obviously, the initial comprehensive plan was adopted. It had a different timeline. That was adopted by December of 2022. We updated the comprehensive plan and adopted the updates on August 1st of 2023. And now we are here with proposed updates for the 2024 version of the comprehensive plan. I'm just going to do a little high level discussion, and then Emma is going to share some more of the details in terms of what we're proposing for the update. One thing we've talked about a few times is the length of the comprehensive plan. It is it's about 208 pages long. It's very dense and has a lot in it, which is of course because the blueprint is a very comprehensive policy or set of policies. But there's been a desire to have more of an executive summary document that would be more streamlined and high level. Shawanda, we can see your screen. Okay. And so what we're proposing to do for this update for this year is, rather than reprinting the entire plan again and sort of having another 200-page document, what we're proposing to do is to create a shorter document that would contain this executive summary of the Blueprint Comprehensive Plan and the initiatives of the blueprint and the theory of action, and really summarize the goals of the blueprint overall and by pillar. And then we would include in this document the aligned metrics and the targets that the AIB and the state board have jointly adopted for the next 3 years. In addition to that, we would include other information around metrics that the Outcome Measures Work Group has identified that are currently in our Blueprint Comprehensive Plan that are in addition to those aligned metrics and targets. And then in this shorter document, you would also include just the changes to items in the Blueprint Comprehensive Plan. So whether they be different language or new language, we would only include the changes in the document in a way that, you know, is easy to follow, hopefully, so that anything that that the public could, you could pick up the shorter version, have a good sense of what's in the plan and what changes were made in the most recent version of the plan. And then if you wanted more information, you would be able to go back to the 2023 version. So that's what we're proposing to publish this year as a standalone document. And what we have for you to consider today are the updates that are primarily based on the legislation that was enacted during the 2024 session, some of which we've gone through as part of the legislative updates after session, and then some additional changes that have been recommended by various stakeholders. And there are not that many of those right now, I will say. And then just as a follow-up, last year we tried to incorporate potential changes in the upcoming session into the Blueprint Comprehensive Plan update, which was very challenging given the timing. We did not make any proposals for today for potential legislation for the 2025 session. We do have a draft list of things for your consideration that we are going to bring for discussion as part of the fall, as we are working to develop the contents of the annual report to submit by November 1st, and then as we move towards session to finalize whatever legislative proposals the board wants to support.
And Executive Director Heiss, just a quick question about the condensed version. If I wanted to get the full version, is it available to get if I didn't have it?
So the full, so that's a great question. The full 2023 version is still, we still have printed copies of it available. So the combination of, I'm holding it here, of this, the 2023 version and the smaller 2024 version would give you the full picture. Something else that we could do is maybe just an electronic version of a document that incorporated the changes into the text of the entire document, but without reprinting it, if that makes sense. So we could make a digital version available that would combine the two versions into one. But we would want to think about printing that because it is not an inexpensive undertaking. But the idea is that the combination of the 2023 plans that we still have copies of and this more abbreviated 2024 version together would give you the full picture.
Okay.
So
But
much
we're
on-
open. That's just that's something that we don't have to decide today. I wanted to share what our thought was for that. But for today, we just need to adopt the content of what the updates will be, and we can certainly continue discussing what makes the most sense in terms of printing documents.
Okay, good.
Okay, so I want to make sure if there are any other hands. Okay, so with that, I think if you can go to the next slide, please, Shawanda. And I can cover this as well. So we did both on the website and through what we call our emails to the world, where we have a mailing list of over 1,000 people and individuals and stakeholders who follow the AIB. And so through both posting on the website and social media and through that our email list, we solicited feedback on potential changes to the Blueprint Comprehensive Plan for consideration. And there is a link to that document. It's also provided for the public, so everyone can see what feedback was received. We did summarize sort of the topics of feedback that was received, and a significant number of individuals, and then depending on the individual, they had more than one piece of feedback. But the funding requirements for charter schools is one topic that was raised. It wasn't necessarily a solution was not necessarily posed, but that it should be addressed. You know, whether national board certification is the only way of accessing the career ladder is a topic that we've certainly had that feedback before and have some considerations in the plan about that. There's some feedback regarding the implementation of science of reading and how that's being done, how the expert review teams are being deployed. There were a number of comments about early childhood mental health programming and models that are being used. The virtual school continuation was also a number of individuals raised that as something to be addressed. And then the integration of social emotional learning curriculum and implementation. We have shared this feedback also with MSDE because there is, in many cases, this is very much in their scope of work in terms of their expertise. We will be following up with MSDE on these various topics, as many of them are not new to us. There are a few that are new that we need to learn more about, but that was the feedback that was received from the public. And then what we can move on to, if there are no questions about that, is what AIB staff is proposing as part of the updates.
Are there any questions on it?
I do not see any hands.
Let's move on then.
Okay. So then, Emma, if I can turn it over to you.
Yes, definitely. And I can share my screen with the proposed updates document.
Thank you.
All right. And I'm sorry, you have to give me 1 second. Google just signed me out. So literally the moment that I was about to share my screen. So I'm sorry, 1 second. Okay, I think I'm okay, actually. All right, if I have any trouble, I will let you guys know. All right. You know what, I'm sorry, I'm still having technical difficulties. If you could just give me 1 second. Sorry.
I can share my screen if that's helpful.
Okay, I think I'm okay now. It's just the one time of the day that I get kicked out of Google has to happen right while we're presenting something. Sorry about that, guys. Thank you for the patience. Okay, I think I'm all set now. As you all know, the Blueprint Comprehensive Plan is organized into 5 pillars, and I'll just do a quick overview of the organization. So everyone, we're just revisiting that, especially for folks who are watching, and just making sure that we're covering what that looks like again. The Blueprint Comprehensive Plan is organized into 5 pillars, and within each pillar, there are anywhere from 3 to 5 objectives. And then falling under each objective is a series of tasks, subtasks, and then implementation guidance and requirements that correspond with those subtasks for implementing the blueprint. We're not proposing any changes to the 5 pillars overall or the objectives that are in the comprehensive plan, but the suggested changes focus on the tasks and subtasks. So the document, and it's still not sharing, but I think that should be now, that we've linked here. It takes what was in the 2023 plan and just focuses on the things that are changing from the 2023 plan. So in other words, if there was something in the 2023 plan among the pillar tasks, subtasks that is not in this document, that means that we can refer back to the 2023 plan and it is staying as is. If requires a change based off of all the criteria that Rachel just went over in terms of legislative updates as well as recommended updates from other stakeholders, we incorporated it into this document. And we have tracked changes that need to be made in blue. So we have a note here about how to read this document. Again, pillar tasks and subtasks that are not included do not require updates and remain consistent with the BCP content from 2023. Whereas language that's highlighted in blue reflects new or revised content. So here we have pillar 1. The first task under pillar 1 that's focusing on expanding access to free full-day pre-K for 3- and 4-year-old children from low-income households. The language of that task itself is staying the same because nothing is highlighted in blue. However, there is some changes to the implementation guidance from that task that needs to be updated. And we see that in the language that's highlighted in blue here. We incorporated the task into this document just so folks wouldn't have to go back into the 2023 plan and ask themselves, okay, what is this subtask here? This all 4-year-old children, 3-year-old children from low-income households who wish to enroll in full-day pre-K. Which task does this fall under? They can still just refer to this document to determine which task it falls under, but they just know that none of this other language has changed because nothing is highlighted in blue. But what is updated is the language here in blue under the implementation guidance and requirements for the subtask. So everything else is staying the same. What's in blue is revised. We've also pulled over all of the implementation and guidance.
I'm sorry, Emma.
Yeah.
What is the revision? Did I miss it?
Yes.
What was it before and what is it now?
I'm sorry. So I can pull up the 2023 plan and read that language.
Just tell me how have you changed it?
But the language here is that for the 2023 through 24 through 25 through 26 school years, Tier 1 children shall include children whose family income is more than 300%, but not more than 600% of the federal poverty level. And this is to reflect a legislative update from the 2024 General Assembly session.
Okay. That changed the definition. That came for the general thing. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if I could just, particularly in pillar 1, and most of pillar 2, I think all of the proposed updates reflect legislative changes.
Okay.
So there is quite a bit of change in pillars 1 and 2. Yes, as Rachel said, that go back to legislative updates. With regards to the early childhood career ladder that now needs to be developed and implemented, changes to the teacher development and retention program, changes to the instructional leadership program. These are all things that are reflected in this document and that you'll see again in blue. In some cases, new subtasks or new tasks needed to be created entirely. So we've also indicated that in cases where we're not actually changing existing language, we're just adding new language overall. So that's noted here where it says new subtask, for instance, in pillar 1. And then there are a few other new tasks, and I'll just scroll to one here in pillar 1. This says new task in new subtask. And in those cases, we tried to be careful about creating a new task or subtask, but that really had to happen when there was just so many changes that trying to incorporate them into existing language didn't make sense. So I'll pause really quickly on the organization of this document and see if anybody has questions. Yes.
Emma, if you could just stick there on page 11 there.
Yeah.
So for example, this is the new task relates to the creation of an early childhood career ladder, which was one of the major legislative changes that was adopted this session. And then you can see that there are several subtasks below that lay out the details of what the new early childhood career ladder needs to include and what the timing is for when different aspects of it take effect. So just as an example of an update. And so there are many of those, particularly in Pillar 1 and Pillar 2.
Any questions?
Yeah, we don't want to read it all to you, although we can if you would like us to.
I'll read it all.
I'm assuming you do not.
We do have some changes that we can highlight that were not resulting from the legislative session, but are other recommended updates, and I can move on to those unless there's other questions. Okay.
I just have an observation, or in light of our prior conversation about how to roll this out or how to publish this, I do think it would be more helpful to have the full document as Member Doss talked about, with the revisions highlighted like you have here, just all together instead of having separate documents. And electronically, in my view, would be fine. I don't think we need to have that cost, but I do think having the separate, just given the questions that have been asked, and I think having it all together would be important.
You say just electronically though, right?
Correct. Yeah, I don't think it's worth the cost to have a.
Right.
If somebody really needs it out there, I will print off a copy for them and give it to them myself.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I appreciate the feedback from Member Dawson, Member Stapleton.
In terms of other updates, and I'm going to ask you to bear with me while I scroll to some of these other sections. In Pillar 3, we have a few updates that came from, again, public or stakeholder feedback, as well as just from ongoing collaboration with other partners who are responsible for implementing elements of the blueprint. So under task 3.4.4, this task focuses on really CTE program implementation and discusses some of the roles of the CTE committee. We are recommending updates around implementation guidance and requirements associated with the responsibilities of the CTE committee to monitor CTE progress in the state. This update would include saying that explicitly noting that CTE committee may request information from LEAs regarding CTE program implementation as needed, and that the CTE committee may review local implementation plan submissions for information related to CTE program implementation as needed. Other updates, I'll pause before moving on to other things, just in case anybody has any questions, so please feel free to ask. Other updates include some updated dates in Pillar 5. So one of the major updates is really more kind of like a technical update, since this has already been done. The blueprint implementation plan submission dates were obviously updated this past spring to have a phased-in approach for or really a bifurcated process for the LEA blueprint implementation plan submissions. We also updated the due date for the state agency implementation plan submissions. So this is reflecting the updated submission date that was, again, voted on and approved this spring. So it's just making sure that the plan actually reflects that submission date of August 15th, 2024. We are also recommending an updated submission date for the Juvenile Services Education Program Board submission of October 1st, 2024. As you recall, the JSEP plan, the initial plan was submitted in June of 2023, and we want to give them the time that they need to update their implementation plan based off of feedback and that they received on their implementation plan when it was approved in May 2024. So we feel that moving this out about a month and a half will give them the time that they need to effectively update their plan. And as I noted, we also have updated the submission dates for the Part 1 and Part 2 implementation plans for the LEAs here as well to March 15th for Part 1 and May 1st for Part 2. Other updates include updating the first day or the first cycle, that's the word I was looking for, that Maryland will participate in the program for international student assessment from 2024 to 2028. And the subtask then would also need to be updated to reflect that MSD shall formally request that OECD include Maryland in the next PISA cycle in 2028.
And if I could just add on this item, this was brought to us by MSDE as they were investigating the process and the timeline for Maryland to participate in the PISA administration. They realized that the cost of it was not included in their budget. So this will allow them the time to incorporate the cost of administrating PISA into their budget, as well as actually going through the process of being able to participate.
And then the final update that we wanted to highlight is the update for AIB establishing an appeal process for LEA flexibility and the allocation of concentration of poverty and special education funding. We may actually update this language just based off of some reflection that we had a little while ago to clarify that the appeal process shall be established in fiscal year 25, not that the appeal process relates to meeting the minimum school funding requirement in fiscal year 25. So I've lost edit access on this document when I got signed out of Google. Otherwise, I would do this right at this moment. But it should read that AIB shall establish an appeal process in fiscal year 25 for LEA flexibility and the allocation of concentration of poverty and special education funding. We'll update that language as soon as I can get edit access back.
Yeah, and if I could just add, establishing an appeal process was already identified by AIB as part of the minimum school funding requirement policy that we would be developing the appeal process this year. And as part of that appeal process, we also are going to incorporate this potential flexibility for concentration of poverty and special education funding, which is specifically identified in the statute, that we have an appeal process for LEAs for those two spending components.
Are there any other changes that you want to reflect on?
I mean, there's a lot of changes, but I think that those are the ones that we wanted to highlight today.
Okay. I'm thinking, Ms. Executive Director, there was, aren't there some changes that we may be making in terms of legislation that we have to go back to? Move on.
So I think my thought is that any legislative proposals that the AIB wants to make or support would either be in our annual report and or in separate correspondence or documentation to the governor and the legislature. And then depending on the outcome of those proposals, we would include whatever legislative changes are adopted in next year's update.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. There are additional questions, and thanks again, Emma, for your work on this. It's pretty tedious, and I see it's hard to follow through all that. But let's take the recommendations at heart where it suggested that we sort of combine some of this to keep people fully tracked as to what's happening and not be quite as confused, because many people are not following this as carefully as people on this line are following, and they may need a little bit more instructions and clarity in how to do that.
I think that's very fair.
Okay.
So then if the, we actually, I don't think we have,
Yeah.
I don't think we have a separate motion for this item, although I stand to be corrected, but I think the motion would be to adopt the updates that are contained in the this updates document.
Okay, so I'm going to move the motion for approval. Is there a second to the motion? Okay, moved and properly second. All right, now then discussion on the motion for approval of the changes to the plan this year. Can't see, there are any hands or indications of comments? All
I
right,
think
if
it's
not,
unanimous.
we're ready for the vote. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposition? Seeing none, okay, the motion is approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so on to the next item of the agenda, item 6, and this relates to something that Vice Chair Kerwin raised earlier regarding the Career and Technical Education, or CTE committee, and their industry recognized credential policy. The CTE committee did adopt a policy in May regarding what industry recognized credentials would be, what the requirements would be for industry recognized credentials in the CTE system that is envisioned by the blueprint and that is being implemented by the CTE committee along with its partners. And you have that document before you, and I can share my screen. Hold on, sorry. Here we go. Okay. Oops. Wrong. Sorry. Try that again. Here we go. Okay. Okay. So hopefully you can see, I'm on page 7 of the policy, where they identify the 7 core criteria that industry recognized credentials will need to meet to be considered part of the Maryland CTE system under the blueprint. And so you can see the first one is that the credential is aligned with the occupation and with occupations that are in high demand or emerging. And particularly also if they meet a regional need or a credential that employers are value. The second criteria is that it provides documented outcomes of positive outcomes for individuals who earn the industry recognized credential, or IRC as it's known. And specifically, they're referring to employment and wage outcomes. That, of course, will take time to demonstrate for a new industry recognized credential, but for existing industry recognized credentials that have a track record that can be looked at to look at the employment and wage outcomes for students who earn that credential. The third criteria is that it be recognized by employers in that industry as valuable and relevant to the job. So that's a critical item. The fourth criteria is that there is an assessment process in order to be awarded the credential. The fifth criteria is that there be industry accepted standards for the skills and competencies that the credential is recognizing. The sixth criteria is that it be something that high school students can earn while in high school, or as part of aligned with a post-secondary credential. So there might be a program that a student starts while they're in high school, but the actual credential takes more time and is earned while they are in either a post-secondary education or training program. And that it also be accessible to a wide range of learners, including special populations, so that we're making sure that we're offering credentials that are available to all of our students. And then the last criteria is around portability, so that it be a credential that is not just recognized in one part of the state, but throughout the state and ideally outside the state. So those are the 7 core criteria that they identified. And then there are a couple that you can see are preferable but not required. And that includes that they be stackable, which I think is a valuable approach, so that students are able to both use a credential that also supports other post-secondary work or training, as well as might be something that is aligned with a registered apprenticeship or is part of a sequence of credentials. So it might be sort of in like computer programming, there might be, 3 different credentials that you can stack, so you earn the first and then you stack the second and maybe the third you earn after high school. So stackable and then renewable, so that there is that ability to maintain the relevance of the credential over time.
Well, let me ask a question on this, because when I was looking at this stackable, I was thinking changeable. You keep in mind who we're dealing with at the time of their lives when they're making decisions about things. They often change. I've seen students late as law school come with one mindset about what it is they want to do, and in the mid-course of something, they have a completely bolt of lightning somewhere and they've gone in a different direction. And so I can't imagine that at that point in time that they will be so certain, so clear about what it is they want to do. And we don't want to have them going down a track with no flexibility of the change or alter that in some form or fashion. So when you're looking at stackable, could that also include things that are maybe changeable, that you have some options to deal with that? Or is that included in what you're already talking about?
So in terms of changeable, the credential itself is would not be changeable, but the student might change what they're seeking.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And so the credential itself is going to be what it is, but students are going to have the flexibility to select the pathway, the CTE focus, and the credential that they are most interested in. And they might decide that it is not, they might start with one thing and then find that it's not what they're interested in.
That's what I mean, that they start down a path, but it's not such a narrow path and it's not flexible enough. But they would say, oh, wait, I think I want to change something else. So they have not lost all of the time, all of the efforts, and who have flexibility, they can change that at some point after they made that decision, because that's going to happen.
Absolutely. And we talked about career counseling earlier, and I think that the importance of making sure that we are standing up these career counseling programs and really giving students more information earlier so that they have a better sense of what they might want to do and what they want to pursue.
That may, the career counseling may help to reduce it, but I've been around a lot of career counseling. There's no guarantee that with the best of career counseling, some of these students are not going to change their minds, and they will.
Yeah, and we know students are going to change their minds. And I think this question came up a little earlier also around what completion of a pathway means. And we're not, that is still something that we've been talking with MSTE about. We've been talking with CTE committee about also in terms of like, what does it mean to complete a career pathway? And what happens if, as I said earlier, a credential might not, a student might start a credential while they're in high school, but they might have changed their mind and started it in their senior year and not complete it in their senior year. And they're going to complete it after high school, either in a post-secondary education or training program. So I think that is going to happen. Absolutely. I think what the questions that we need to be thinking about is like, what does that mean in terms of counting students as being in a pathway, as completing a pathway, and as meeting the goals of the blueprint? Because the law requires students to, so what the blueprint law says is that students who have met the CCR standard have to choose a pathway.
Gotcha.
They have to choose a pathway, but they don't have to complete a pathway necessarily. So that is where we come in to say, what are our goals in terms of what proportion of students do we expect would actually complete a pathway and earn a credential? And when we are talking about CTE pathways, just a reminder that the blueprint does have the goal that 45% of high school students earn an apprenticeship or an industry recognized credential before they leave high school by the year 2031. So there is that goal, that goal in the statute.
Gotcha. Okay. Are there any other questions or comments here?
There are a number of hands. I do not know whose hand was raised first. So if you all could
go in alphabetical order.
Okay.
I think Joe had his hand up first.
So just wanted some clarity because I may have missed this, but is the goal is that each of these industry recognized credentials meets all 7 criteria, or they have to meet just one of the 7 criteria, or is it multiple criteria, or what happens if you have a credential that meets 6 of the 7 elements, but not the 7th?
My understanding is that's all of the criteria. Now there is the CTE committee is going to have an application process for and they've already gone through MSDE staff has already gone through the existing CTE programs that have industry recognized credentials to see how they align with this policy. And they've already sort of kind of taken the list from, many hundreds to over 1,000 to, a smaller number, but they're still in that process. So they do need to meet all of the criteria, but they will submit documentation, application, and then CTE committee staff, MSTE staff, and others will work with whoever's proposing this to try to figure out whether the credential that they're proposing meets the criteria, or if there's another credential that would better meet the criteria.
So then is it it's the CTE committee that would go through and validate each of the IRCs to determine whether they've met the credentials or the criteria and whether they are included in the catalog? That's how I guess it's envisioned, that they're the kind of gatekeepers to determine what's in the catalog and what's not in the catalog?
So currently, so as part of this process, the MSD and the CTE committee, so they've been working together, have been reviewing, because we obviously, so currently, there are a number of CTE career clusters that, some of which end in an industry recognized credential, some of which do not, and some of which the credential is not necessarily, there isn't an assessment, or, it doesn't meet one of those 7 criteria. And so for credentials that don't currently meet one of those 7 criteria, they are not going to be a recognized industry recognized credential. How the goal is that every CTE program, the goal of the blueprint is that every CTE program offered ends with the student having the possibility of earning an industry recognized credential, which includes apprenticeships.
Yep.
And so what the CTE committee has been working on is coming up with these policies that transition from the CTE system that we have now, which does not, all programs do not lead to an industry recognized credential, to a system where they all do lead to an industry recognized credential that meets the criteria that the CTE committee has proposed.
Mm-hmm. And then do we know, this may be getting too in the weeds, but it does seem like, especially in I'm trying to think back in the criteria, but criteria 1, where it's things that are identified as high value, right? Like it's some of this seems fairly subjective, right? Like I think and I know there were some parameters in there, but I know in Baltimore City we had a challenge around childcare, because I think a lot of the CTE pathways in childcare were either ramped down or eliminated because they were identified as not being high wage jobs, family sustaining wages. But at the same time, this is also a high need industry for the city and for society as a whole. So I think there's some competing interests. I think Jennifer and I have also talked about on the Eastern Shore, I think a lot of the work with the longshoremen and a lot of the work with the watermen that probably wouldn't meet the potable portion of the criteria, but are very, very important industries within that region of the state. So I think there's some competing interests that seem like they need to be identified and teased out.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm looking at the criteria 1, and I'll just say the credential is associated with occupations that are in high demand or emerging within Maryland as defined by the Governor's Workforce Development Board using state labor market data and employer feedback, or as defined as a regional need or emerging credential by the local Workforce Development Board. So I think that they've tried to both create a process that sets a statewide, sort of has a statewide definition, but also allows for potentially emerging needs that are specific or that are identified by the local Workforce Development Board.
But keep in mind, you would know that before the student proceed down that path, because that would be somewhat either listed or you'll be counseled as to the path that you're about to proceed in. And so you would know in advance. It would not be that you would start on something and realize that it has no recognized acceptance. You would know that in advance, because all of this would be somewhat listed, wouldn't it? Or you would have counsel on that about the path you're about to take. Would that be
Well,
correct?
that's exactly what you're describing is, I think, exactly what the blueprint was trying to address, that we did have programs that were ending with credentials that were not recognized, were not of value, were not aligned to occupations that are in demand. And so the first step of this process has been MSTE and CTE committee staff going through the existing kind of inventory to sort of get a sense to look at how they measure up related based on this policy of what we want our industry recognized credentials to be.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with the ladies first approach. So,
I actually think Dr. Kerwin had his hand up. I'll defer to Dr. Kerwin because I think he had his hand up first.
No, I defer to you. I absolutely defer to you.
Thank you. I actually have a couple different statements. I think the first is I know that this is an incredible undertaking, and we do have a responsibility to make sure that our students are prepared to leave their K through 12 education experience ready to be both college and career ready should they choose. I think to sort of echo a little of what the chair said earlier, I do worry that we are losing an exploration phase, which is so critical in this part of development, that we are sort of forcing children in these very early stages to make decisions about pathways that in some way or another, should they change their mind, limits their ability. And I think our goal should always be to expand opportunity instead of restrict opportunity. And so, I do want to be careful that we're not losing that exploration phase to allow students to say, I tried that and not that. I have a technical question, which is for those credentials in which an industry recognized credential would not be available until after graduation, knowing that our goal is 45% of students will receive an industry recognized credential or registered internship or apprenticeship. How is that being counted? Because they won't have that. So I'll pause there for that, but I do have a couple other.
Okay. So on that is actually that is some of the feedback that we have in the motion. The staff recommendation is that you approve the policy and provide some feedback to the CTE committee for further consideration. One of which is how students who work towards a credential but do not earn it, either are not able to earn it or for whatever, there probably are different reasons, how that will be counted in that 45% goal, which the CTE committee is working on the plan for what they're going to propose in terms of how to count toward the 45%. And so we wanted to give that feedback, and we've actually already verbally given them this feedback around how to count those partially earned credentials, or whether to count them.
And thank you. And I think sort of relatedly, my like question around credentials is that there are certain industries in which they do not have recognized credentials, and yet they have incredible importance to our economy. Hospitality would be one of those examples in which there's not a ton of recognized credentials, and yet we know tourism and hospitality tend to be large drivers in the state. Similarly, emerging technologies or emerging industries don't have recognized credentials yet because in essence, they are still emerging and developing. And so we always want to be preparing our students for the future and not for the past. And so I wonder just how we are going to leave some flexibility and some room to both allow students to gain the skills that they will need upon graduation to enter these fields. Will there be a way that the CTE committee or the governor's workforce board or somebody maybe in partnership with higher ed institutions, industry partners to create locally recognized credentials, that would be both regional and statewide recognized credentials.
Absolutely, yes. I think your observation is exactly right. There are some occupations that don't necessarily have a rigorous credential that demonstrates that a student has the skills and expertise to do the job.
Yeah,
And so part of it,
but one challenge is though, is that this is not set in concrete, that you would constantly go back based on the observation just made to update this in terms of the credentials, not only now for the future, because you can look at technology, for example, and the question there becomes expansive in terms of what you may look at. So this is not in concrete. This would be something that would be constantly evaluated based on what I've seen, so that you would change, increase, or maybe change some of them as we go forward. So that has to be part of it. That's what I think that it is right now, right?
and to develop a
Yep.
new credentials that and so yes, that is definitely going to need to be part of the process moving forward.
And then my last question is just a curiosity question. What percentage or what number of existing CTE programs need to be revised or revamped in order to meet these criteria?
I do not, we will see, I don't know that off the top of my head. Someone may share that with me, or else we will follow up and get that information.
That's a good question. Get back to us.
Vice Chair Kerwin?
Yes, just a couple of quick comments. First of all, the origin of this CTE pathway came out of the commission recommendations, which had studied very carefully CTE-like programs in other countries. And the premise was that there were lots of high skill, high wage jobs in the market that weren't being filled by people coming out of high school. You know, there was this sense that everybody had to go to college, and not everybody needs to go to college. And the idea was that you could get into a high skill workforce area and possibly even build a career out of that. And so in that context, I think what they've done is really quite substantial and good, because there's a rigor to this, and we're not, the rigor will mean we're not sending kids down a pathway where they don't have a real opportunity at a high paying job, because there is a standard, a credential. They're doing this in areas for where you have the possibility of building a career. So in that sense, I think they've done quite a good job here, because I like the rigor and the thought that has gone into this. So I think secondly, you know, somebody might say, I want to be a master plumber, and they take the first few courses in that career pathway. They've met college and career readiness standard, and they say, you know what, I don't like messing around in the basements with all these dirty pipes and whatnot. I think electronics is maybe more my thing. Well, they could switch and start down an electronic pathway. Electronic. Now, they might not be able to finish it by the time they got out of high school, but they certainly could. But they would have met the college and career ready, so they could. I think that there is flexibility, flexibility in this approach. The one question I have is, you know, there's been a lot of interest in this issue by members of the General Assembly. I mean, they are
very invested in this CTE pathway and think it's important for the state's economy, et cetera. And I think there's a lot of interest in the public about this, because I talk to parents all the time that say, you know, college isn't for my kid. What is there for my kid? And this is what we're building here with this CTE pathway. So my question is, Rachel, was this aired? What did this get out to these people in the General Assembly and elsewhere that have a very strong interest? And did the CTE committee get any feedback on this proposal?
Yes, the CTE committee received a significant amount of feedback that they incorporated into the policy that that they have put forward.
Enter the ballot number following the.
And that does, as
Rachel's breaking up for me. Is she for you all? Yes. Rachel, there's something wrong with your.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just said I was unstable. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Not now.
Okay, how about now?
Maybe turn off your camera for a minute.
Good idea. Is that any better?
Yes, much better.
Okay. Okay. So I'm not sure what you were able to hear. So I will just, the CTE committee did solicit and receive a significant amount of feedback on as they were developing the industry recognized credential policy. And that did include members of the General Assembly who have a great amount of interest. I'm just, and there is more in the policy document around what kind of, how they solicited feedback, but they received, I think, about 150 pieces of feedback from 150 individuals. So they got a lot of feedback.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Okay, in addition,
Sure.
question.
Member Doss.
Okay.
I saw member.
I did. Thank you. My question is similar to Dr. Curran's question, but I wanted to know, was there any insight in how the community college played into this, and also with dual enrollment credit, because dual enrollment is the backbone of incorporating the college credit into the workforce areas, and having the student the ability to be nimble and to go back and forth if they wanted to with workforce courses and also academic college courses, so to speak. And so it gives the student the ability to blend those if needed. So that goes back to the flexibility that we were talking about. So can you speak to any of that as far as with the community college and dual enrollment credit?
So in terms of the community colleges, they were definitely provided feedback and were part of the development of the policy. Specifically the dual enrollment piece. So to your point, there's dual enrollment that is for college credit, and then there's also dual enrollment that is non-credit. And some of the dual enrollment, both credit and non-credit, can be towards a certificate rather than a degree. So we kind of have two different, so we have college credits toward a degree, earning a degree, and then credit or non-credit toward an industry certificate.
Exactly.
All of those things are provided by community colleges, to your point, and are part of the blueprint. Where it gets a little more complicated is what counts towards meeting the 45% goal versus what is considered not toward the 45% goal, but you're earning a college credit towards a degree that is needed for an occupation. So this is another piece of feedback that we have provided as something for the CTE committee to consider as they're developing the 45%, the plan to how to count towards the 45%. Because I think this is where flexibility overlaps with just how are we counting to meet our goals. And
We lost you again.
the issue.
We seem to have some technical problems there.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I think something about this time of day and my internet lately. I'm gonna get on the iPad. I think that might work better. But so there is this issue of counting and not double counting college credits that a student earns towards a degree that which might be the credential that is needed for the job.
Right.
But for the 45% goal, it is very focused on essentially occupations that don't necessarily require a college degree. So that is part of the feedback that we're providing as something
We're losing you, Rachel.
Why don't we?
So we can keep having.
Is that a question we could probably take offline and deal with later? I'm not sure we can hear what you're saying. So we may have to postpone additional questions on that unless
I'm just gonna get on my iPad. I just don't have time. Okay.
Yeah. Are there any other questions or comments? Member Dawson, are you there?
I'm here. I'm good.
All right. Okay, we may have to come back to your question at a later point.
Correct.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So what I was trying to say is that we're going to need to come back to this.
We lost you again, Rachel.
The call drops.
Okay, they can hear you.
Sorry, my phone isn't working either, so I'm having a lot of technical challenges here.
Now you're echoing.
Rachel, can
We come pretty close to a conclusion anyway.
There
Mr.
we
Chair,
go.
I think you might be echoing.
okay, you should be good now.
Okay, so all I was trying to say is that how college credits and workforce credits count towards the 45% goal and completion of the pathway is something that we're going to need to have additional discussion about. And it's it's one of the items we've identified as something to discuss further.
Okay, good. I
Motion.
concur. Mhm.
Additional question or comments for,
Leave and come back.
I have one question.
okay.
In the text of the policy, it discusses like I guess the application for trying to become an industry recognized credential. Is part of the application process a discussion about the capacity of organizations to kind of like scale this up? I know that capacity of, like, we recognize that there are a lot of jobs out there that recognize the credentials, but in terms of actually delivering the services to students, like, how do we know that, or what's the process or conversation around the capacity of offering these opportunities to students, other than just because it talks about just having the credential be recognized. I think we lost Rachel.
Are you there, Rachel?
No.
I think she said she was gonna log out and log back in, so. But I don't know if there's another staff member available.
Well, just an overview. That's a pretty big step to start with, the recognition of the pathway by the industry, because keep in mind what Member Curran said earlier. The problem had been, for the most part, is that we were sending kids down a path that had no potential either for a job or career or anything else of that sort. This, I think, if done right, would essentially eliminate that. Because if you go through all the procedures and the processes outlined by working with workforce development and everyone else, and you have the appropriate counseling, it should provide us with a pretty good pathway about where these students are headed. So that's the big concern that was addressed with this approach. Nothing is absolute. We talked about some of the challenges associated with that, i.e., how do you stack this? How do you change it? And more importantly, how do you deal with those who have not completed that, and you base your numbers on our 45% rate that we need to ensure they got a credential that was acceptable? That's the challenge that we have to come back to try to figure that out. How do we count that? Because the likelihood that you're going to have more students than you recognize who probably will not finish for very good reasons. They change, they alter their approach to this, and therefore by the time they graduate, they have not completed this. And so how do you count that? And we would have to develop a policy, I assume, in some fashion coming forward, of how do we deal with that potential challenge. But the big problem that we've addressed, I think, is one that's fairly clear, that we had a large number of students that were simply floundering in areas that they should not have been, and inappropriate counseling that placed them in a pathway that did not fulfill the needs of having a credential or job or any aspects of that for the foreseeable future.
Well put.
Rachel is not there. I'm not sure.
I
Okay.
think I am. I'm sorry for my technical difficulties, but I think I'm back for now, at least. I was not able to hear Member Robinson's question, but hopefully it's been addressed or not.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the importance that, as the chair was just sharing, of this policy. My broader question / concern was, in the text of the policy talks about, I guess, the application process for becoming an industry recognized credential. And I was wondering about the extent to which the capacity of organizations or whatever to deliver upon, like, if someone applied for that credential, like, to get the training for it and things like that. I was wondering about the capacity of our state to meet the demand for these industry recognized credentials.
If I could make a
Could they fulfill that requirement of helping to prepare the students? Yes, I think that's a legitimate question. The more interesting question, though, is whether they can get an actual job as opposed to simply being trained even though they're in a recognized credential and getting a job. That's the ultimate question at the other end. I think a lesser question would be, can they get the appropriate training? Because even with the appropriate training, there's no automatic guarantee that you get a job. At least your chances are greatly enhanced, even if you have a job, even if your credentials in a field that is fairly recognizable and acceptable. There's no guarantee of getting a job, but we should be able to provide the training that carries you there through that pathway.
Member Robinson, were you wondering about the technical support for organizations that might propose an IRC and how they would go through the process?
Yeah, I guess that's part of it. I guess I'm wondering about like the rollout of this. Like, how does this look in terms of getting more and more students being able to do it? Like, recognizing that it's a credential is one thing, but then like, and I know that might be beyond the scope of, I don't know if it's beyond the scope of the policy, but I was curious about that aspect if you could talk to it.
Well, I'm looking at the timeline here, and so they kind of have it set up so that applications would come in starting in August this month, and then be due by the end of October, and then MSDE and the CTE committee would go through their process to approve or not approve, and then those credentials would become part of the program for the next year, is what the timeline looks like. I imagine that there might need to be, it would take more than just a few months to stand up a program with a new credential, so it might take another school year to implement the program. But I was going to suggest that we have actually, and some board members have attended CTE committee meetings and such, but I don't think I've ever invited the CTE committee to come talk to the board. So I wonder if we might want to do that. And some of these things that are a little bit beyond the scope of just this policy, but very important topics that we could ask them to come and at least have an initial opening conversation that I imagine will lead to additional conversations.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any additional questions?
I do not see any hands.
Okay.
So there is a motion document. I'd be happy to read it if you'd like.
Yeah.
The motion is to approve the CTE committee's industry recognized credential policy with the following feedback for future consideration. Number one, consider developing additional guidance for students who partially complete or earn partial credit toward an industry recognized credential during high school. And this is relates to Member Lynch's question. And then number two, as currently written, completion of an IRC includes an option for students who earn college credit in high school to be included in the 45% goal. And this is a little bit related to Member Doss's question. As part of the CTE committee's plan to meet the 45% goal, reconsider this provision to ensure that college credits are not counted toward the 45% goal and also counted toward completion of the dual enrollment pathway that is separate from the CTE pathways. So number two is essentially asking the CTE committee, and we're happy to be part of that discussion, to think about what makes sense for counting towards 45% that does not inadvertently double count college credits that are applied towards a degree. So those are the two pieces of feedback that we've actually already at least shared verbally with CTE committee staff. Mr. Chair?
So do we have are we ready for a motion?
Yes. Are we
Okay,
ready for the motion?
I'll move it.
Okay. The second to the motion,
I'll second.
moved and properly second, and we adopt the motion on CTE committee as read and as articulated. Make sure that we're ready for the question. Member Robinson, you were on the last person there. I want to make sure we covered your question, your concerns appropriately before we adopt this motion.
Yes, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Any additional concerns or questions regarding the motion? If not, we're now prepared to vote on the motion. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing or seeing none, the motion is approved as stated. Okay, is there anything else for us, Madam Executive Director?
We have two more items.
Okay.
The next item 7 relates to the MSD expert review team deployment plan. MSD submitted their deployment plan for the upcoming school year. We shared those materials with you. The AIB staff recommendation is to approve the methodology that is proposed for the upcoming school year, contingent on receipt of the list of schools that would actually be visited during the upcoming school year. The MSDE is proposing to use the most recent assessment data to identify which schools meet the criteria that they've laid out in the report. And that data is actually from this past spring, from the spring of 24 assessments. The data is going to be available later. And so while we have the methodology that is being proposed, the criteria that's being used to identify the schools, we do just want to make sure we receive the list of schools that actually meet the criteria based on the most recent assessment data when it is available. That is the motion. We can go into more discussion of what the methodology is if you'd like, but I know we're running out of time.
Okay.
A quick question, if I might. Sure. The expert review teams, they'll be basically those that are going to low performing schools and high performing schools, but they're also expert review teams looking at literacy plans and at math this year. I just don't happen to remember the breakdown. How could you just summarize the breakdown on those various categories?
So actually so there is a breakdown, and I cannot share my screen at this time. But if somebody else would like to, it's on page 5 of their report, or you can, if you want to pull it up. But essentially, as you described, they will be visiting the lowest performing schools, lower performing schools, higher and higher performing schools, as well as schools that are identified based on the low performing subgroups of students, including students with disabilities and multilingual learners. So there's a whole breakdown of the number of schools to be visited, but within that, every school will be an elementary school for this upcoming year. Mm-hmm. So they will only be visiting elementary schools again this year, or this year, and they will be focused on either English or math, or if they meet the criteria for both, then the teams will focus on literacy and math. But every visit is going to be focused on literacy or math. Elementary literacy or math.
Very good. That's helpful. Thank you.
Any other further questions? Okay, we are approving the methodology and we're approving the waiting the actual list of the schools that will be provided us based on the methodology that have been here for a stride. Okay, all in favor, any question regarding the motion? Okay, all in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing or seeing none, the motion is approved.
The last item are the advisory committee nominations for pillars 1 through 4. And I will turn it over to member Manco and Rachel Umstutz.
Dr. Manco, do you want to kick us off or?
No, maybe if you want to go ahead and we'll just start, if you want to just start with what's on the deck and then I can provide some commentary at the end around our process over the last week to.
Shawanda, can you put those slides back up? And while we're getting the slides, basically the first slide provides a very brief overview of the history of the advisory committees, and we'll not read you each of these bullets just with time here, but essentially this is our third round of appointing new members, and we can go to the next slide. And just a reminder that the intention here of the advisory committees was to provide input and feedback on blueprint implementation from across the state to engage stakeholders and public members of the public. So we have 5 members on each of our 4 committees and 1 student member on each of the committees as well. And we gave you a few reminders about how we initially started with staggered terms, that we either had folks with 1 or 2 year terms. Now we're at the point where everybody has 2 years, but they alternate. So no committee has all people leaving in 1 year. We also gave you a few numbers about the last 2 rounds. So in 2022, we appointed everybody. There were 24 new people. In the fall of last year, we had 5 new members, and this year we had 7 seats open from terms that expired and people who did not were not able to reapply to continue in that role. On the next slide, we have a little chart to show you the data that in 2022, all 30 seats were open, and 4 of those were students. We had received 212 applications for the initial round. Last year, late in the summer and into the fall, we posted the vacancies. We received 53 applications for the 5 seats, which were 3 members and 2 students. This year, with 7 seats open, of which 3 were students, we received 125 applications. So we were really pleased with that data and just feel that it shows that people are invested, people are watching what's happening with Blueprint, and that they want to be involved. And so again, this year, when our subcommittee got the opportunity to look at all of those 125 resumes, we were very impressed with the slate of candidates, and it's really hard to pick when you've got all of these great folks interested in the role. We did want to mention one note here that 25 students applied this year. So in our first year, we had 4 students apply and 4 students were selected. This year, we had 25 students for 3 seats, and that reflects some intentional work in building relationships with student leadership agencies. And we've been really fortunate to connect with some amazing student leaders. So again, picking the student members was tricky too. I think it was Member Doss who said that their resumes were pretty impressive. You know, these students were they were shining with what they've already accomplished as high school students. The one other fact that we wanted to point out on this slide is that, as you'll recall, in May, we had a motion and we announced that we were going to be standing up a new advisory committee for Pillar 5. So the 125 applications includes Pillar 5, but today we're only moving forward with Pillars 1 to 4, replacing members who've left because it's a lot of work to pick another set of members and to get it right. So we'll be bringing those back to you. If we could go forward one more slide. That's the Pillar 5 update. So we will, there were 54 people across the state that were interested, as well as 11 students that applied for consideration for Pillar 5. And again, we will bring that recommendation back to a future AIB meeting. So for today, we have a motion for consideration that identifies new members for the vacancies on pillars 1, 2, 3, and 4. Dr. Mako, did you want to add anything there?
Just three real quick points. One, just wanted to elevate the importance of these entities for us overall as board members. I think this has been, I think we've done a lot of tremendous work as a board group, but I think this is one of the better things that we have done because it's really helped to harness the expertise and the knowledge and the understanding of folks across the state. It's helped to engage the community and it's helped us make better decisions. So, just really wanted to elevate how important these advisory committees are as an entity. And, and I think as time has gone on, it's, we've gone through and the process has evolved a little bit. We've gone through and we've added student members. The students have been exceptional as contributors. And, as you were referencing what Dr. Doss was saying, like, you look at some of these students and you read their resumes and you're like, well, what the hell am I doing with my life, right? I mean, it's like there's they are 16, 17, 18-year-olds kids that have just tremendous accolades and experiences, and just really, really excited to have the opportunity to work with them. So, and then the last thing I wanted to elevate is just this is a large undertaking to go through and read through 125 applications, look at 125 resumes, wanted to give hats off, of course, to Rachel, who has helped to lead the charge. Shawanda and Lisa were on each of the calls, and then of course, board member Robinson and board member Doss, who, I think the group of us have worked incredibly well together to go through and examine and vet each of these resumes and applications and try to come up with some good recommendations to bring to the larger board about who these 7 new members would be. So I'll kick it back over to you, Rachel A., to just look through the membership analysis. And yeah.
Perfect. This really is one of it's one of the funnest parts of the job, I think, is working with our advisory committee members. On the screen, hopefully what you can see is the data analysis showing the applications from this year only. So broken down by region, and I'll scooch it down just a little bit here so you can see the full breakdown of the regions. But you'll see that we did have applications from every region this year. That does not necessarily mean every county, but every region did have representation. And in consideration when selecting the members, that is one of the factors that we take into account, is just representation across the state, so that the advisory committee members are able to share about implementation in their neck of the woods across the state. So on the far side where it says total selected, what we're looking at in that category is the new balance of advisory and committee members across pillars 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the regional representation across all, because obviously with 6 members on each advisory committee, we can't have every county, or sometimes not even every region, represented in every individual advisory committee, but we aim to have good representation across the entire state. Executive Director Heiss, did you want me to put the list up? Okay. We are excited to announce this year's nominees and recommendations for the seats available. And give me 1 second here, and I'm going to make it a teeny bit smaller so you can see them all at once. We have one member seat open for Pillar 1. I'm just going to go through these here so that you can see them all. We had 1 seat open for Pillar 2, as well as 1 student seat open in Pillar 2. We had 1 student seat open in Pillar 3. And then we had 2 member seats open in Pillar 4 and 1 student seat open in Pillar 5, or sorry, 4. And then as you can see here, the county of residence, we've got great representation again. And if you look at their primary roles, they bring a lot of expertise in education here in Maryland, as well as Blueprint focuses. What you don't see here are all the other things that they've done, which are pretty amazing in their full resumes. And then finally, the terms here reflect what I said earlier, that each of the new people coming in will have a 2-year term that begins now and will run until the end of June in 2026. And that our high school students have 1-year terms that will conclude next year with the opportunity to extend for 1 more term if they're interested. So I think that at this point, there's a motion for consideration to approve the recommendation of the subcommittee to appoint these members to the advisory committees.
Why don't you mention the name now, please?
Oh, say that again.
Why don't you mention the names?
Okay, we have Jennifer Mata McMahon for Pillar 1, Robert Willoughby for Pillar 2, Ubajani Mumba for Pillar 2 also, Asha Andi for Pillar 3, Jessica Grant for Pillar 4, Charlita Jones for Pillar 4, and Kadeen Bell for Pillar 4.
Okay. And for those who cannot see it, we have from this group, from Baltimore City, Caroline County, Carroll County, Howard County, Charles County, Prince George's County, and Caroline County. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. All right, now we're prepared for a motion to approve this list for inclusion on the advisory committee of the so named listed pillars by their names. We have a motion. Okay, it's been moved. There's second to the motion?
I second.
Been moved and properly second. Are there any questions about this list and or the recommendation? Please raise your hands. Okay, I see no one listed. Okay, we're now ready for the vote. All in favor of the approval of the so mentioned names for the various pillars listed associated with their names, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, seeing none, the motion is approved. Thank you. Madam Executive Director, is there anything else you need to cover for us? Well, we've lost her, I assume, right?
Yeah. There we go. Yeah, no, that is the end. That completes the agenda.
Okay. Okay, we get down. Thanks everyone for all of your work. This has been a very exhausting meeting in many ways. We've covered an awful lot. So I want to thank again the staff and our executive director and all of the team for helping us get to this point. There may be some questions related to additional meetings that we'll be contacting you. So apologize for that, but we're trying to accommodate the schedules, we're trying to accommodate the work, and we're trying to make sure that the future meetings are productive in terms of timing it so that we will have all the information before you and not have to go through additional meetings in the foreseeable future. So, there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, it's probably moved that we adjourn. Okay. Second to the motion?
Sir.
Okay, then properly second. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good meeting.